everybody else ready?
Those meetings were as soon as I
We'll go ahead and get started. I'd like to, no.
And then you can get those.
I'd like to thank the council for being here. Councilman Martin will be here with us shortly. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to thank our law enforcement officers and our first responders. We have been able to capture the individual that has been at large for the last several days. That just happened. He was arrested after, I believe, a car chase in Utah County. But I am extremely grateful to all the efforts placed by all of our law enforcement officers. I also understand the frustration that our residents have felt over the last couple of days with the limited information that was released to them. I appreciate their patience as well, and I believe that once the information becomes public, they'll understand the choices and the decisions that were made. So thank you very much, and Chief Carr, I know you had a lot to do with that personally, and we are all extremely grateful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
How is, without mentioning names, how are the officers involved?
They're doing very well. There will be a process now that we have to go through before one of the two comes back, obviously, as we do in the OICI. So we're hoping within a week or week and a half they'll be back.
Okay.
Everything will be
okay. Anybody have any items on tonight's agenda that we need to talk about? Move any things around?
Mayor, I do have, we will not have a need to go into closed order on property for the reasons that Gordon has been really sick. And I don't want to see him until next Monday. So anyone who's trying to contact him, leave him alone, let him get some rest. He really needs to get healthy. And if anybody knows Gordon, this is not him. He's always trying to come in and to spread his cold where he's got going to it. So we want him to get restful. So and Blake is actually at a conference in St. George. So those items that we need to discuss, and there were some good updates for council. So we will do that in the next meeting. I can always sidebar and read on a few issues.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Any future agenda items that anybody on the council would like to discuss? Okay, I want to mention, obviously we've had a long weekend here. I think that in the future, once we have a chance to debrief with UPD, that we'll probably want to have a conversation about how the incident command ran and how what we can do to improve and what we can and how well it went. I know that I was extremely impressed with city staff on the way that they took care of Unified Police Department. I got quite a bit of response back from multiple individuals through the sheriff's office and through UPD expressing their gratitude. So just I think we should take some time once we've had some time pass to talk about that. So I just want to make sure that I mentioned that. All right, moving on to administrative reports. 3.1 city manager updates. Brett?
So Mayor, I was actually going to give Troy some time to Chief Carr to give us some updates, but kind of covered that. I want to echo about the staff that was here opening up the office on Saturday morning and made sure we had supplies. It's interesting, we had as you know, we had a volunteer thank you breakfast that morning. In between the snowstorm and this person went at large, people decided not to come so much. So we had a lot of food, so we fed officers. And as you know, Mayor, me and Tammy and some of the communication teams was in here with policy with you and two other mayors, and Mayor and also Councilman Sheldon Stewart from Riverton. Got to spend many hours with you in here. I think it was around 10 hours or so. But that was a good event in a way. And I say it in a way, and I want people to understand why. We just got in this building in August, and we're starting to wonder, how do we function in a disaster? And we train on that heavily all the time in our city. I think the public knows that, and those who are involved with the city, it's a passion of mine, and it's not easy for mayors and the council to share that passion with me about making sure we're ready, our readiness. But it did flush out some things for us. I don't know, where do we stage up media? Where do we stage up incident command? Where do we stage up the planning section chief? How do we follow through the communications? And where's policy? And we always kind of knew policy would be in this room. But the biggest thing I learned from, because technology, and we're going to talk to FEMA about this as well, is when we get in a disaster or a crisis mode, and we need a policy group in here for decision-making to move budgets and stuff, we have to do a letter of declaration of emergency, then what's happened with technology, thanks goodness for Facebook and everything else, we've learned really quickly that probably the biggest push we need to have a communications team in with policy all the time. So now we have to think how we split our resources, because all of our elected officials now are very techy, and they're looking if we can, it's not true.
Tweak is entirely something.
Tweaking, the chief might want to talk to you.
Entirely different.
That might be more appropriate, actually. Anyway, it was a good lesson learned, and I had some other good takeaways. And Mayor, I want to echo what you said. We also flushed out some issues maybe with the radios and stuff from UPD and our own radios and the building, how that functioned, and we're going to strengthen those issues. And the signal Wi-Fi, particularly on the county side, officers ID, Wi-Fi in there, and the strength of that. So those things are really good to learn. The biggest takeaway I want to say is, for me as the city manager, to see how we work together. And I want to publicly thank Tammy and Jonathan and Destiny and Wendy and Alan and Monty coming over the building. He was really sick. We got him open and he left. And Karen and Vince and Lauren, you gotta know they actually got hot coffee, hot chocolate, donuts out to all officers. We had 100 officers out here.
Yeah, if I could for just a minute, maybe
Please.
make some notice of that. That morning when we were beginning our tactical search of that, and I just today got the numbers, we had 7 precincts, 9 divisions, for a total of 95 officers from UPD that descended on Harriman within 2 hours. That was backed up by other agencies. There were 12 other agencies with 77 people, including federal officers, and I believe 12 UFA people in and out throughout the course of the day. Yeah, so we had a total of 172 officers in the city that morning within a couple hours. We had people from the FBI on down to every police department in this valley, including our own. So it was a very, very good effort by everybody involved. And we just can't say enough about how Harriman City basically pulled out all the stops. We, for instance, had 50 tactical officers that needed to be switched out after laying in the snow for about 4 hours. We brought them into a church, and Harriman City had them fed within about 30 minutes. So it was very important. In fact, they were calling for that. And Wendy, I can't thank you enough. Thank you very, very much. She moved mountains to make sure those guys were taken care of out in the field. So again, we can go into probably finer detail on it once I have a few more details. But right now things are very fluid and they're coming in. But he is headed back to Salt Lake County right now.
Good. Salt Lake County Jail, right?
Yep.
Good.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Chief. I know we'll do a little hot wash more, so as we get more information, it'll be valuable to the council understanding what all took place. But I also want to let you know, I had a direct phone call from Chief Hudson Saturday night to thank me again for Winnie Thomas and Alan Ray for what they did. They were sitting in the command. He didn't get to see what we was doing up here. So I commend our employees here and policy group is here, but also to make a phone call and say, thank you, you have rock stars. And I says, I know they are, and that's why we employ them. So thank you, Alan and Wendy. That was a personal phone call. I want to make it public as well. That tells you how much our people shine. So on to the next topic. I have a lot here. So we talked the last meeting about ICSC coming up in May. I have heard back from only 2, the mayor and Clint showed an interest in going down there.
The Vegas.
This is the Vegas. This is to find out what can bring and help bring some economic development to the city. And those dates are the 20th through the 23rd of May. The thing is critical is we try to stage up to get you closest to the convention as possible. And so those rooms go quick. And so we've already reserved rooms. So if you want to go, you may be on the outside of that area.
Yeah.
So that's all. If you have an interest, you know right away. But I want to pull the trigger on that so we get that solidified. Otherwise, I'll move to who's already contacted me. The Washington D.C. trip, again, we talked about it before, and Jared actually reached out to me, and he says, I recommend Nicole Martin go on that trip because she's so connected already with federal delegations, representatives, and local. And
Don't get me wrong, I'd like to go.
What's that?
I said, don't get me wrong, I'd like to go.
Yeah, I mean,
I think of any of
what I'm
us.
trying to get across is Councilman Henderson recognizes that if we're gonna send people back, let's send the best people we can to represent the city, what your comments were. And he knows that she's really well connected, and the mayor will be.
Mayor, right?
Yeah,
I
so,
think we
Okay.
discussed that a little bit last week.
yeah,
Yes,
he did say the mayor.
Oh, shoot, you got bumped. Oh, man.
Yeah.
No, she
No, I
said no,
agree with
no.
myself.
So,
Yeah, for you
I'm
to go.
holding on that, but here again, we are, gotta move, I talked to Laurel Price today to validate that the dates will be back there to talk, or about the things we were talking about.
What are those dates?
EPA, ACUB, they're kinda gone. It's
That's
the
ICSC.
7th through the 10th of May.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry?
7th through the 10th of May.
I would like to go to the ICSC, but it's like, we have two people going, and then it's like, does the city really need to have to pay for another person to go, that we
Well,
have two people that can make it
Interesting you
back?
say that, we looked at our budget, what we budgeted for, and we're stretched at this point,
Yeah.
who's going back.
So I feel like you're
If we have
represented.
more, we will come back to you and amend the budget, we can't,
I think it's fine, I think that
Okay.
we're
Jared,
well
you're okay with
represented.
that? Thank you. Then you're okay? Yep. Alright. We know who's going then, and I've already talked to Nicole, and she was on board with that, and thanked Councilman Henderson for that recommendation, she says, yes, I would love to go.
Well, I think we've all,
Oh,
it's not
We
just
talked
me, we all
about-
kind of
Yeah,
talked.
when we were at council last week.
Okay, I wanted to ask Alan, he has some good news again, we always like good news, right? Our sales tax report came in today for the quarter, and now we wanna talk about that briefly.
Well, we're up 34% this January over last January, and year-to-date, we're about 24% up. Most of it still is being based on our population growth. We had only 22% of what we received was based on the local sales, so, you know, we're still benefiting from the population growth, but, we need to increase our local sales as well. But the total distribution was 367,000 compared to 277,000 last January.
For the same quarter of last year, so,
Well, next month will be the Christmas stuff, so we're looking for a big one next month.
So those are the fourth quarter, or what?
No, that's January, just
367
one month.
is January, right?
1 month. That would be the sales that happen in November. They pay us 2 months delayed.
Okay.
thanks for clarifying. But it's always, we like to hear that, as we meet the projects in front of us. So also, the Utilities in Towns is in April, the 25th, 27th through 27th. And this is the mid-year conference, and you experience some of the League of Towns now. I think Jared already told me where he's at, it's a tough time for him to get away, he always looks more the annual one that's in Salt Lake. So,
I definitely wanna go to that one, but
Okay.
I'll make my own, sleeping areas. I have that one, I just wanna stay there.
we still need to register you, so,
You can register me to the thing. You don't
okay,
have to
thank you,
book me on
appreciate
hotel
that.
room.
And
I will be
there we
going.
go, and Clint's, he already told me that before,
I'll
sorry.
be out of town.
And I think Nicole told me she would be attending, so we have 3 members of the council, so also Jackie will have to notice that too. Okay, we'll get those arrangements made. I was gonna have Blake do some things, but we can go past that one. I want Mike Malloy to talk, our manager over planning, to talk about the open house coming up.
Yes, following our conversation last meeting, we presented the proposed 10 amendments to the general plan, all focused on commercial amendments in the general plan. We had some discussion, but of course, we are moving forward on holding our open house in 2 weeks. That meeting will be starting at 6 o'clock. And then
What day?
we will have our,
What date?
that is it's 2 weeks from today.
Seventh.
The 7th, yeah.
It's 6:30.
6:30.
6:30.
Oh, 6:30.
6:30,
Yeah.
okay.
This is a comment that came out of council, who's concerned about people having enough time to get home, and so we bumped it a half hour.
February
And,
7th.
That's going by
I
my
think we need to
direction.
be careful
Okay.
how we communicate this, exactly what it is, it's just
the
these,
fact.
yeah.
February 7th, 6:30.
Right.
6:30 to 8:30.
Thank you.
Right.
And then we will
There
have,
again, that's the comment I strongly heard from Councilman Henderson that said, let's give people time to get home and
Yeah.
before you do that, so. Thanks for queuing me up on that, Dan, and reminding me on that one. I had a paper, they're on my desk, and I'll get them to you about, been gathering some information since the Harriman Promise Foundation Committee's been formed. And, we haven't gathered all the information they requested, but I also was curious about, are we gonna charge for the use of our buildings for these youth sports groups? We typically, the last councils have actually given the use of the building for their meetings for free. And I need to get a nod on where I need to give you that whole list. I know you're spending fair, you've not seen the whole list. I've been in rush this whole week, so I apologize for that. It's on my desk. I'll get that to you so you can just sidebar and see, tell me where you're at. I'll kind of keep a tally on that. But these are groups, this is several groups within the Arts Council that use the building for free. We have the Daughters Pioneers use the building for free. We do charge for people doing recitals or preschool graduations that just use the building. We have let the Harriman football, Harriman baseball, Little League programs, and Little League soccer. And they don't use the building a lot. You'll see those numbers in the report we're gonna have coming to you.
The community center or this?
Any building
Any
facility.
Okay.
So it's philosophy that I need to understand where you're at. I cannot waive fees as your city manager in direction by you all. And it goes lengthy, 4-H groups that are nonprofit. And you need to help me cut off the line or say we're gonna charge you, because that's not my lane. I've heard all sides of this, and will we overrun? But when you look at the numbers, I don't feel like we're getting overrun, but yet, is it fair? And who is in and who is not, is the biggest question.
Right. Well, and that's the thing is that just since this come up, I've gotten, I told you about the questions I've gotten from nonprofits,
Yeah.
so we would quickly be overrun once the word gets out that.
If they know it's a free spot.
But then it's like, but then how do you let the other people
You
have?
can't.
You can't pick and favorites.
Yeah.
You can't pick favorites, you have to be consistent, so.
Right,
Well,
I agree.
It's just my opinion, what I was gonna ask you for, sidebar, don't bring it up in front of everybody since we're talking about it, is that I'd like to know what just a nominal fee would be as far as pure maintenance costs, right? So if it's, and by size of group, I mean, if we're talking about a group with 5 people that uses a conference room, right, that's different than Harriman football that has hundreds of people coming in all night long for, for their registration. Like what does it cost us per hour for cleanup and et cetera? Right. Because there is a cost every time somebody uses it.
And 10 years ago, people used to make your point, they used to use our building for their registration. That's not the way it's done anymore. They do it online. So anytime they actually use our building, it's usually for their bigger board meeting. They just need more space for a bigger room to meet. It's a meeting, it's not the sign-ups where you see 700 kids come and their parents coming through doing sign-ups, or 1,200 baseball players with their parents coming through and signing up. It's not that. They do it all online. There really is no sign-up at the building like it used to be, which is good, but I need to be more clear about
Exactly what
how much is being used.
Yeah.
Well, I just like some
And
guidance
what's the
from.
impacts, and, if it's just to me, it's not that much of an impact, but there is some.
Because I think there's an easy way to do is if there's, and with this is where we need staff to kind of help us out. If it's to use one of those large rooms for an hour, if $10 covers the cost of whoever goes in there and cleans it up afterwards, great. Let's charge them $10 for that hour. And just by charging that nominal fee, you're gonna cut out a lot of the ones that would abuse us, just giving.
And my concern is, cause we like the ham operators of Harriman use the building, are they in or they out, and it's the other government entities, Unified Fire, Unified Police use the building. I think they're part of us, so I need some very clear direction. You need to see the list, and I should probably have to put on it for educate up, and then make a decision. Cause I know that when you get that far along, there's people saying that they're gonna get your attention.
What about
Say your decision.
can you also include in that, is there other locations in the city, like per se the library?
There
that
is.
they could go and
The
use
rec center,
for free? Is there a fee for those?
yes, well, there is for rec center, the library's a little different. If it's us asking for it, they do not, but if it's someone else, they do have a nominal fee to cover their janitorial needs.
We could, well, I guess it doesn't matter, cause our costs are gonna be different on our
And
nominal fees.
the problem we're having right now is people are wanting to schedule up the building, and I can't give them an answer because you adopted the fee in December. But I really felt from then and through now that there's been a philosophy change of a thought process of, I can't continue to do what we've done in the past, but then when we brought the baseball, football in here on the field rental, you wanted to give them time to adjust to that next year. Where I did say to the staff, because I says, it's a one-time, right now, we'll continue what's been said until I get clear direction from council, so they can't schedule out the whole year, you know what I'm saying? They're not gonna get it free for the whole year, but I need to give you time, have the information, digest it, get it noticed, and have you give me clear direction.
Yeah, that's
Thank you.
good.
So I'm sorry about all that burden, but I think it's not saying I'm gonna use, yes, but if it's someone coming to run an open house, and then being a little bit of running politics, I'd say absolutely not. That's happened in the past, and we have went back and enforced that and said, no, you need to pay it because we're not supporting your campaign.
I don't mean to interrupt what you're doing, but go back, but you started with the Harriman Promise Group and you were working on on their questions.
Yeah,
Is that
there's-
your update on those, that you're working on the questions?
There's a
you
whole
submitted?
list of them,
I
and
saw the list.
was a big list.
And the only thing is, is this question they had, are you gonna still allow the groups in the past use it
Right.
for free? That's still gonna be your decision. The rest of it, we're getting the numbers, and, the finance side is already out there.
Okay.
Just trying to gather our information, because until recently, we had a good tracking mechanism, other than going through the file, pull out the paper, read every application, answer all our questions. How many times did we keep the deposit? Well, the problem was, you had to inspect the facility right after the use, so you knew who to charge for over filthiness or whatever. That was hard to do, because sometimes that one room, that's all we really had, got used 5 times in a weekend.
And I wanna say that I've seen efforts above and beyond by our staff on this. I think I've made it fairly clear that, we didn't wanna overburden our staff with this. And I know how much our staff cares about our community and our residents, and they have gone well above and beyond what we have asked them to do, and we appreciate it, because that helps our residents, get to do what they're trying to do to bring us a solution. So, I very much appreciate that. I wanna make sure that staff is recognized for that, even though, you're gonna do everything you can to help them, and we appreciate that, and I know they do too.
They were trying to push to have it done for their meeting again last night. I spent last Tuesday night with them touring the old facility and trying to help them understand the uses that could happen, where it could be remodeled, where the floating walls, where the bearing walls. Because they wanted to try to capture everything, try to come to you all with a full plan.
Sure.
And then this Tuesday, we toured in this building, what we could use this building after hours. And I showed them how this building, kind of the way it functions, the way we designed it was, conference rooms can be used with just the card access. We got cameras, so we don't have to have staff here. Before, if they wanted a conference room, we had to have staff here, so that always costs us more. So this is a better design, thinking about all the years we spent over there, and again, when we had the one room. We had to schedule around council meetings and planning commission. While this facility here, we can have court, we can have something going on down in the community room, and we can be holding council. So that's the beauty of what we've done here. And that was all the planning part. Do I think the numbers, it's actually, I was surprised, and this is all preliminary, but I was surprised, it didn't get used as much as I thought it would. That's what shocking was for me, even when it was being given away.
Yeah.
So we'll have that full report for you, so
I appreciate that.
just an update, because you asked for an update.
Yeah, I just wanted to know where we're at, and I think working on the questions is fine, you have other jobs to be doing too,
Yeah,
so
well-
it's okay.
And Saturday didn't help anything.
Yeah, for sure. Sign it, extenuating circumstances.
And then you know how
there.
this week's gone, we've been up on the
Yeah,
hill,
on the hills.
downtown quite a bit. Also, I have a paper I'll give you. We did an update on the compensation benefits discussion from last time as well. And I can tell you this, we broke it down in full-time mayors and in council, what their council are being paid and what not paid, and the industry benefits. and I'll get that paper tonight to you. Here again, I ran out of my office too fast. And we are actually one of the anomalies. We are the only city that has a part-time mayor that receives any type of health benefit. The others do not. So other than that anomaly, we are in line. You'll see that pay-wise, we are in line. Similar with council. Council is a little bit on the lower end. That's still you all's decisions. We covered a whole, I can't remember the city we covered, but we have all the full-time mayors.
Thank you for putting that together.
In the top part, and it's color-coded, so you can see it. It's very transparent to you. And then you'll tell me what, if you want to do any more with it.
Thank you.
So even though Travis has been off, he's been working on that, make sure.
It's a good
that-
guy.
And I tweaked the last little bit, accepted, so I want you to understand that we really don't fit in with everybody else on some of the things. You need to see that, okay?
Okay.
And I'm really, if I'm done, unless I look at some key staff, if there's anything else I left out for tonight. You were saying a lot of things to me.
I did say a lot.
So Tammy, oh yes, it is Tammy time. It's right here, I got my other list. The launch meeting, we're calling the launch meeting first and second. We've been meeting with our facilitator and, it's interesting having their mayors in here Saturday, by the way. They're very impressive. We actually have and they're probably watched, I don't mean anything, but they was very complimentary about our building, the way it's flows and structured and how we network, and very impressed we actually have a vision and mission statement. And so, what's interesting enough, in this new mayor and council put together, we want to review and go back through that and say, launch, we're kicking off. So what does that mean? And what is your vision for Harriman? And we'll step you through that for the first day, and the second day we'll get more of direction, what you want us to take out of that. Tammy, you want to talk about that a little bit?
The second day is, it's really taking that vision and then taking it one step further on how, how we wanna carry that vision out, and, what are we going to do in the city that really presents that vision to our community, throughout our staff, and is everybody's messaging the same, are we all staying consistent? That's kind of the information we've been given thus far on that meeting. We are also meeting, with some of the individuals that are assisting us with that lunch meeting again on Monday, to go over more in detail, what they plan on, putting together for that meeting. So we'll definitely continue to update you as we receive the updates, but it is something that we're looking forward to. We think that it would be a really good way for us to set our path moving forward. Do you want me to just move on to my next stuff?
I just wanted to finish your list before you go to your next one. I have it right there, so it's crossed off, so thank you. But with this, we was really intrigued about, there's so much news to this council, and to make sure that I don't want to just assume that you align with the past. I want to make sure this is you, at least 2 years until the next election, right? And we want to make sure it does our vision statement meet what you want. And that's what launch will take you through. And then I'll move to a mission statement.
That's something that we're really planning on going through. We really want to look at that vision statement and see, does it truly define our vision for our future, where we're going, and make sure that all of you are in line with that, because if we can't all stand behind our vision, then maybe it doesn't say the right things. So a big part of that will be determining whether or not we need to tweak that at all, or whether we agree with what it says and we need to decide what it means, to everybody, so that we can make sure that everybody's moving forward on the same page.
So now the next topic is Tammy's,
Was it me again?
at least you know, yes, it's still you. So Tammy has an idea about, what she wants to do with social media, and I'll just leave it at that.
Well, it is a new year, and we do have new members on our council. So what we want to do moving forward is we want to do a meet your council members segment, and we just want to shoot a video with each of you that's talking about, why you're here. what it is you hope to accomplish, how the city funds are moving forward. And we want to do this after the launch meeting so that we know that, you know, we're working together, we're on the same page, and these are the goals that have been set as we move forward. And then you can give your perspectives on each of those and let the community get to know each and every one of you. We like you to appear human to our public, that you're real life bodies, you're real life people. And we want them to know that. So it will be videoed, so it won't be a live broadcast. So, you know, we'll be able to edit it, because when you refer to certain areas of the city, we want to be able to then
Cut
in and out to those areas of the city, or if you're talking on a particular subject and it involves, you know, a map or a document, we wanna make sure that we show that. So it will be, you know, somewhat of a production, but we think it's important for them to get to know each and every one of you,
That's a good idea.
in that manner. So
then we
just be
become
prepared.
approachable.
Yes.
Yeah.
So just be prepared, because I'll be scheduling those times with you, but it will be when it's convenient for you. So even if that's 10 o'clock at night, then we'll do it at 10 o'clock at night. If it's at 6 in the morning, we'll do it at 6 in the morning, but we'll make sure that it's when it's convenient for you, so that we can get that put together.
I'm thinking 3:45 a.m.
Super.
You know, don't.
Which of my staff wants to do that one?
She's already up, so.
Just a question though, was anything like this done for the other council members when they came in? And if not, I would suggest that, we can start with the new ones, but I would suggest we do it for
We
really
want
all
to
of us.
always do
yes.
this. So this has been a vision of mine for a while, and I think we now have all of the equipment that we need in order to be able to make this happen. And we can do it in-house. We don't have to contract out, which was very expensive. So that's why we're able to do it now.
Okay.
But yes, and it is something that was discussed with the last council as an idea, but we now are able to make it happen. So, it is something that we wanna continue every time.
Tammy's already had this vision for over 3 years. When you think about that timeline, to get the right staff, that she can do some of these things. You already seen this just when we have chat with the chiefs, and Riley and Troy have done that and been very successful, had a lot of feedback on that. And after last Saturday, we actually see a segment we wanna do another chat with the chief about how the public can really help us. They actually, no offense public, but you didn't help things move along very well Saturday.
But it felt like once you asked them to stop,
did.
they stopped,
They
which I
did.
thought, oh, this is good. It feels like they respect, cause they don't think about that. I just don't think they think about, I don't think they want
But
to.
the point
put
is,
it in danger.
yeah, we wanna educate them on
Yeah.
why, when they're out there showing background, they're watching it.
Yeah,
And so they know who's in there, and it doesn't help us at all.
right.
So it's a good educational piece, and the chief's passionate about that, and I back him 100% on this, because the mayor knows when he was in city policy, getting the debriefings, he saw how much it was hindering
Sure.
having a capture Saturday.
But I think it is because they think, oh, this
Communication
is
and
what's going
education.
on, people, this is what's going on.
And you're
There's
absolutely right,
something
Sherry.
about that.
We reached out to several individuals, either that were live streaming or that were moderating some of the bigger pages that our community uses, and they were fantastic about stepping back and saying, how can we pull this back so that we're not putting anyone in danger?
Yeah,
So
I
I
think
think it's
that-
really just an educational piece so that
Yeah.
we know how to work together. I think it should probably, as we think about it, see how we can incorporate that in our emergency response plan.
Yeah, it could be a
Because
benefit.
we're gonna deal with it every single time, so how, what can we do to keep it from, to have a piece that we can try to, bring them into the process so they're part of the solution and not part of the problem.
Well, and part of that is we are doing, Coffee with a Cop on February 6th over at Knott's on Main. In the morning. I'm not exactly sure of the time, it is at 9? Yeah, so at 9 a.m. And that's one of their topics of discussion for that day is,
Tell me the date again, will you?
it's February 6th. And so you'll see some information going out to the public on that. We were just trying to fine tune some details, and we'll probably get that posted for this week, so.
And Mayor, you're right, we recognized early on in the IC downstairs that a lot of information was being spread. And our biggest concern immediately was the movement of our tactical teams being displayed. which we didn't know who he was, or if he had that information, we don't want him to have that information.
Right.
The other issue we experienced later on was actually twofold: misinformation, and people with good information, but they were reporting it on social media. So we want to learn how to capture that, but we also never want to turn the media or the public away from calling 911, thinking that Facebook is now 911, because it's not. And so we fully recognize, and again, we had Wendy down there that did a backup plan, real quick, hasty, get on social media and try and get what information we could. But there's good information that comes across that, and we don't want to hinder that. It's the misinformation that really took us off guard that day.
Just trying to figure out how to coordinate our
Right.
efforts so it works.
Right, and then the follow-up with the school lockdown was, the follow-up to that was complete misinformation by somebody who got on social media and really caused public panic. And that was extremely concerning to us, and the mayor worked with us to get that resolved,
And
removed.
I don't think there was any malintent from that individual. I
No.
think they were just trying to, help. I understand that the residents felt that there was a lack of information, and that was something we really struggled with, because they want more information. They're so used to having all the information at their fingertips, and we were intentionally denying that information to them. And so, as they were getting information, they were trying to share it with each other, as most of us would normally do in that situation. Unfortunately, we had one individual that had some misinformation that had shared it, and it was actually causing some substantial problems. So they were great about working with us. I don't think there was any malintent. It's just one of those things that we've got to start to make sure we're planning for and working as it'll happen again.
And we would remind the citizens to please turn to verified sources such as the city and UPD's social media to make sure the message, because we make sure we've got that message before we send it through both channels, so that information you can nearly guarantee is accurate.
So, sorry, Sherry, did I interrupt you?
Nope, I just said awesome.
Oh. So I apologize, because I missed, no doubt what I'm going to say is, something you've already said. Is there a reason why?
I think that's for whatever's coming later.
So let me, if I can, just put on my communications hat for a minute, and then also maybe tag team with the elected official hat. So, one element that was problematic when I was acting in the communications role during the crises that we had with the fires was a challenge with elected officials. And so now I'm wearing both of them, and I think it's a nice time to discuss, because there's so much information that we will get as elected officials that is either not intended for public use, or certainly not intended in its entirety for public use, or not at this particular time. And so it's really important for elected officials, this hat, to defer to the communications plan, whether that's coming from our communications specialist, who is then coming from, in this incident, it was a police incident, when it's a fire incident, it's coming from there. But one of my biggest frustrations at the time, and I remember having that sort of, and it's an awkward, hard conversation to have with an elected official, which is why I'm bringing it up, because this makes it much easier than Tammy having to bring it up. And I'm not saying this is a problem, I'm saying this is a good time as a new council for us to discuss this, is during the fires, we would be putting out the accepted communication piece, and then we were getting elected officials that were putting out contrary information, and all that does is make it look like your city has no clue what they're doing. Now, it's not that any of that information was erroneous even, it was the fact that the elected officials had information that it was not time to release yet. And so you have that element of confusion, and so I just think it's good for processes, as elected officials, but also as communication, and in this case where police was taking the lead, that when we want to put out that very unified front, which you absolutely must do during an incident, you have to defer to the organization that has the lead. And so, in this case, it's police. And so from my perspective, my learning experience wearing both my communication and my elected official hat, what I chose to do was share from the official sources, which gets to your point, Chief, that it reinforces that you're the one with the information That is the only correct information, and the rest of us and collectively are parroting that. And then there's a consistency of message, which is very important, and we're not undoing what it is you're trying to do.
Right.
And then hopefully, I mean, you can't, of course, the citizens can report whatever they want to report, but if there's that unified front and the latest and greatest and accepted information is coming out from those sources, the hope is that they will then just choose to share versus creating their own information. And then in the void, because that's where the misinformation always comes out, it's always in the void of information where people just, they are anxious for, and they're nervous and they're scared and all of those things that they have a right to be, and of course they are. That's where the misinformation comes out. And what I found really effective as a communications specialist is, if nothing else, you fill that void with, I mean, I particularly liked your information, I'm pointing because I don't know who came out, the information message that simply said, don't share, don't share the location of, yeah, again,
Tactical movement.
so in the void of information, it's good to put out, we don't have any information. Or it's important that we're not sharing, you know, so you're still filling, but you're filling with an innocuous, we don't have information.
But the residents
they
still
can
feel
check.
connected.
Yeah.
Yes, so if there's, I mean, I think it's always helpful to do postmortems on things, which is what, you know, I apologize that I've missed some of this, and like I said, I may be parroting what you've already discussed. But process becomes super important. Unified message is imperative for confidence in the management of the incident. And elected officials, and this is where I'm putting it, are sometimes the biggest problem, because we have access to all the information and then we undo. And I don't know that it happened, and I'm not saying it happened here, I'm saying it's happened when I've been a communications person, and it's challenged because the communications person can't, or feels like their bosses are the elected officials, and in fact, in often case, the elected officials are the problem. But nobody feels like they can say it. So I will say it with both hats. Sometimes the elected officials are the problem.
What we found very powerful was the ability to reshare with as many followers as you individually have that message. And so Tammy and I worked together, right, Tammy and I worked together and said the message coming from UPD is the message.
Yes.
But what we needed was the power and
The amplifying of all of our channels. I
so
thought
that
the
was
mayor did a nice job, just for doing a postmortem. I thought you did a nice job on your interview. I thought that the other individuals with the county, and I thought all of that was well.
As far as involving 3 cities that came together as one, was quite an amazing task. And to be quite frank, it went off very well. Nobody got hurt. Today ended an event that changed all of our lives out here.
Well done.
Nicole, I appreciate your comments, but we was talking about what I learned from having this incident, and it's always good to have these tests. But normally we think of policy as just like me, and they're with the mayor and the council, and we're an official in that policy group. But I learned from Saturday's event, because you're all connected and pushing, amplifying that message out, it's the same message that we now need to have a communication specialist in policy. So,
Absolutely. Well, because again, you have to, we as elected officials and as policymakers are only sharing the approved message.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, the approved message is never the same as the situation that you're sitting in. Because you're not, nor should you, release things in real time. You release according to the safety of the incident. And the example I'll give with the wildfire, and the one I was referencing, was the containment. You know, we were publicly sharing a certain containment. That may not completely reflect where we are, but we're not ready to say we're at this containment. We are publicly saying this containment. And so when you as a city come out with, we're 30% contained, and then you have an elected official say we're 60% contained, you look like you don't know what you're talking about as a city.
I
So
remember
that's,
those nights.
yeah, that's an incident that was a direct reflection, which is very frustrating when you're trying to manage the message. So just a cautionary tale, again, I'm not saying that we had any of those problems, I just think it's a healthy discussion to have, because we seem to have lots of incidents out here in Harriman for our little corner of the valley, and so I think it's really,
everyone wants to be here.
I guess so. It's helpful to have those policies in place with everybody right up front saying, this is what we know we need to do when we have a crisis.
Well, and safety and communication are the two keys to everything happen. And another thing to take into consideration is all the information you as an elected official get that could be an advantage to us as part of the investigation, that maybe comes through a private channel to your social media, and to have somebody in communications that can bring that to us as well,
Yeah,
so
that's
that
fair.
you have that two-way.
And I think we're gonna continue, this is a big enough event that I think we're gonna continue to have some breakdowns and some how can we improve and
It's
what
a
can we
new
do.
frontier with the social media, and
It's
So-
good to have the discussion.
This is something we should have on a future agenda as well, because I mean, just from my personal experience, I don't do the social media stuff, whatever, but when I got the call early in the morning, can you help spread the word, people need to stay inside, lock their doors, how do you word that, how do you put it out? It was much easier later in the day when you said, just share our
There was a
message.
official statement, so
Great,
that was great.
like, that was easy and that was consistent, so.
Yeah, that was great.
There'll be some good hot wash and takeaways where we'll plan to update you on it.
And I think we're gonna have all of us do some incident, or some FEMA training to help us
Yeah,
move
but
forward as
we'll
well,
do this
so.
hot wash, we'll be back to points about this season. Nicole wants us to put those FEMA training beds again, back in Maryland. But the last piece I wanna say to all this issue is this. The bottom line is, yeah, we had a very ugly incident take place this last weekend. I was around the last time we had a murder here. Okay? Harriman still is a great, safe place to be. That's the message I want to raise. In reality, we're a great community. We're a safer community than others in the valley. And we're not gonna talk about it when you see the reports that our chief sees, and sees the whole demographic of 3 counties or so. You really get to understand, we are really fortunate where we're at. And he does a very good job making sure we're safe, so
Our officers are.
that's the message I wanna say.
Obviously, someone was top-notch even to confront him in the first place. That officer wasn't even on duty at that time, right?
Well, no, he was actually going
Or
home,
he
so
was or not.
we've been having a very big issue with vehicle burglaries and wire thefts and those kind of things, and they knew that. And this officer was headed home after work and
That's so
said,
impressive.
that's interesting, this guy's kinda hiding around the cars and that kind of stuff, so that started the engagement and the shootout.
But that's so impressive that they're just on,
Yep.
whether they're on duty or not, they're just on.
Yeah, and in fact, yeah, the other one, as you mentioned, was off duty.
I just think that, to me, that's just very impressive that they're just paying attention, whether they're,
Yeah.
that they're just living their job.
They do, they do a fantastic job at it. We really do have the best.
I think we're probably gonna need to move on here.
I was gonna say, I think we're past 3.1 now.
Are you done, Brett?
I am done.
Okay, so I
For now.
apologize to everyone else that's here, I'm sure we'll try to start getting through this. 3.2, Camp Williams report on environmental resources. Who is, hi, how you doing?
Good, how are you doing?
You're doing good.
May I come forward?
Please.
Mayor, Council, my name is Robert Price, I'm the Environmental Program Manager for the Utah National Guard. I've spoken to you a number of times in the past, although I don't know if it was to the exact same group here. With me, I have Mr. Walt G., he's with the National Guard Bureau in Arlington, Virginia. And behind you are 3 individuals from Parsons. They are the project managers who've been involved in this project over the years. We provided you with some talking points, and we provided you with a newsletter. I am not going to go over those,
Thank you.
okay?
Thank you very much.
In your own time, you can look at those, and if you have questions, you can get back to us. What I'm going to do is speak to these issues. So, this project really started in about 2010. We completed field work in 2017. Parsons has been the contractor on this job the entire time. I've been the project manager for the Guard the entire time. So, what we're looking at here, for those in the back there, this is Camp Williams installation at the bottom of the picture, the installation boundary, and the areas above are essentially all private properties. So this project is part of the Military Munitions Response Program. What it does is it looks at historical military training activities that have taken place on primarily non-Department of Defense owned properties with the intent to clean them up. And this is a high visibility program. It's congressionally funded, and a lot of money has gone into this site as well as this site over by High Country Estates. This is part of the same project. So essentially what has happened here is we discovered a few years ago that there was National Guard artillery training that had taken place, we presume sometime prior to World War II, and they were firing into these low hillsides along what's now the installation boundary. At the time, part of this property was National Guard property, and so that made it eligible for federal funding to come in and do the cleanup. The site has grown tremendously over the years. We started with a couple empty shell casings on the ground, and we've grown over time. What you're looking at here, the area within this little boundary here that's colored, that area and this isolated area up here are areas that underwent a remedial action. So those were cleaned up. Almost 100% of those areas. There's some very small areas that are too steep for us to get people onto, and we've got GIS data we'll provide the city on that. But we've worked with the Harriman staff, the planning people, in how we've approached this. But we'll get you that data. I guess the takeaway from this is the red areas are areas of high use or high density.
Don't use that word here.
So what we were looking at here is artillery rounds primarily that detonate in the air and discharge shrapnel on the ground. It's an anti-personnel weapon that the French developed in World War I. And so they create a tremendous amount of metallic debris. And this is a density map showing that. The stars, which you may be able to see, are unexploded ordnance that was found on site. So during the course of the project, we removed 81 artillery rounds that were live rounds. The large boundary that you're looking at is the total area that was investigated. So as we went through this process, we made more and more discoveries, and in part we were aided by the mine operators there at Staker Parson. The map behind you shows transects. Those may look like contour lines, but those are investigative transects that were done throughout the parcels with the intent of determining what the extent of contamination was. And so outside the cleanup area, you can see, this thing will never work when I want it to. You can see these dots scattered in here. And so these dots are what we call munitions debris. They don't have an explosive hazard, but they are an indication of the possible presence of an explosive hazard. So a round is detonated nearby, debris is left. And we use this as an indication of the potential for unexploded ordnance. So this map kind of gives you an idea. This entire area was investigated for potential unexploded ordnance. You can see the areas to the west. We did not find any sort of military-related debris. These areas in here we did, and we took, because it's very low density compared to the areas that we cleaned up, we negotiated with the State Department of Environmental Quality and came up with a risk-based approach on how to investigate this area. We did not clean out the entire area. So basically what the negotiation says is that due to the low levels of munitions debris, it's highly unlikely that there's any munitions items remaining. And the extent that we investigate is related to the future land use that Harriman has planned for the area. So what we've done here is we've overlain our work with your land use plan. And so there's areas within here that are planned for recreational use, light or no development. And then there's areas in here that are planned for commercial or residential use. Those areas were investigated at a much higher rate than the non-residential areas. And so if you look at this is probably about 1,800 acres or so total. The area that was investigated, the transect investigation area, was over 1,500 acres. In the low density areas, we did probably 12 miles or so of transects, something like that. Parsons can correct me if I'm wrong. In the smaller high density area, we did about 13 miles of transects.
Per acre?
For
total for that area?
For total. And so the density is significantly greater for those areas. So that's kind of where we stand. We've submitted a final report on the cleanup to the state. We anticipate within a couple months we'll have a concurrence from them on it. So the takeaway is that the removal action from our perspective is complete, and anyone should be free to develop the property according to what the development plan is. Now, in munitions cleanup, it's impossible to say you've gotten everything. And so there's always a potential that someone could find something. And if they do, we want to know it. I'm sure we'll find out. So going forward,
And just for the public, if you find one, don't touch it.
Exactly, call 911.
We actually have an educational program that we are beginning that will go right to that.
Right, and so that's the follow-up. Part of the remedial solution that's approved includes an educational program. And we'll be working with you in the future on that aspect of it. The other thing I want to touch upon is that as part of this project, we have what's called Remedial Advisory Board, a RAB. Harriman City has participated in that. We have a member on the board. We have a community member as well on the board. That group, the fieldwork was completed in about February of 2017. And the last time that our RAB met formally was in 2016. And I think that's probably the last time that we presented to you guys as well. So it's been some time. Our intention at this point is that we will adjourn the RAB. In our opinion, our work is done. And so the newsletter serves kind of as the final message to the board. And then this presentation is kind of our good news message to you.
You know, as soon as you do that, somebody's gonna find it.
Yes, we have had
And as long as they don't touch it, it'll be okay.
That will never happen.
So it just to kind of help out, we brought in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, who are the experts in military munitions, and they went back through and they basically double-checked the contractor and everything they did, just to make sure that we did as good of a job as we possibly could. So it wasn't just the contractor going out and clearing it. We did have government people out helping with it.
The detection technology that's used is a geophysical, visual geophysical magnetic piece of equipment. And so basically, it imposes, well, it's magnetic. It imposes a magnetic field, and any sort of metallic object that's subsurface will feel that magnetic field and reflect or create its own field. And so the equipment puts a magnetic field in, and then it measures the response that comes back out.
So what you're saying is the people that go search for coins on the beach would really like to have this.
Yes.
Right? And so I just
Very
wanted
much
to point out that in the course of the investigation, each time we get a detection, we have a threshold and we decide whether or not that's an item of interest that we would excavate. And so everything that meets that criteria is excavated by hand by EOD technicians. On this site, they excavated 159,000 metallic items. So it's remarkable how much, and most of that was munitions related. So it's really an incredible level of effort that took place to investigate and remove those items. And they have all been removed from the site.
There's lots of horseshoes in Harriman too, though.
Lots of
horseshoes.
So, if anyone has any questions.
Thank you very much. It's good. I know it's been a long project, and we would love to, have one to mount in our, in City Hall, just one big, it's part of the history. So I'm just saying, either one would be fine.
I appreciate what you've done. We've known on, and we actually had a few that were unexploded. And we were talking about Factory 2, and that was interesting to watch that detonated. Another one was picked up, and I won't say what happened. It goes back to what we were brought it down. We went, what are you doing? So caution. We'll do that. But thank you very much.
Any questions, please let us know.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for coming and listening to all that.
No problem. Thanks for having us.
Just what you're saying.
We found a lot.
We'd like to keep this. It's history.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
I'll give them the engineering loves that stuff.
It's a good kind of, maybe when it became the public, just all the stuff that was put there, and then,
All right, we're gonna move on to 3.3 Mountain View Corridor Project update. Joe, how are you doing?
Excellent.
Good to see ya.
Here yourself. Yeah, nice to see you again as well.
Joe's great.
Yeah. Say the same about your staff. We're working on a lot of things together. Getting to phase 2 of the roadway and building interchanges, excess property that we have that we don't need that you would like. Working on those arrangements as well. So I'm Joe Kimmerer. I work for Utah Department of Transportation. I'm the project director for Mountain View Corridor. Melinda McFarland is here as well tonight. She's on the Mountain View Corridor team. And when we talk about Mountain View Corridor, it's a group of projects in the program. And we've built 1, 2, 3 of those projects already. So we've got more on the way. So I wanted to give you an update of what we've done, kind of where we're going, and some of the challenges to get to the interchanges being built. Yeah, the handout that you have mirrors this presentation. If you have questions along the way, feel free to just grab my attention and we can talk about those as well. If you look at the color scheme does have some meaning here. Everything in blue has been built already. And so kind of orient you here. North is to the top. Here on the top here is Interstate 80. State Route 73 is towards the bottom of the picture here. So we have constructed from Porter Rockwell now up to 4100 South. We have constructed 2100 North from I-15 to Redwood Road. The green is funded. Okay, so those projects have dollars to them. And the project here from State Route 73 up to 2100 North, we're calling that the 2100 North Extension. That project will be under construction this calendar year. So that will be typical phase 1 of the roadway, 2 lanes each direction, large area in the middle for future freeway expansion, and a 12-foot wide trail for bicycles, pedestrians, and that sort of thing. I'll talk about what's funded, and then we'll move to the red, which is unfunded. We have a section in Salt Lake County that is funded from 4100 South up to State Route 201. We expect to have that project under construction about a year from now. The project is funded for $495 million. We own most of the property, the right-of-way for that project. We have already relocated Rocky Mountain Power's transmission lines. They've got a 345 kilovolt line, 138 they have been relocated out of the way. Kern River has two 36-inch high-pressure gas lines through that area. We have relocated them as well. So the idea is we get out ahead of the projects, we clear the corridor, shorten the construction duration, and drive the risks down out of the project. So we expect this piece from 4100 South to 201 to take about 2 years. Starting down at the south end of the project, and so this piece of red and that piece of red are the remaining Phase 1 Mountain View to be built. And so again, Phase 1 is 2 lanes each way, 12-foot wide bike and pedestrian path. This section down here will connect 2100 North to Porter Rockwell. Piece of here again.
What's the estimated cost of that piece?
About $300 million for the program.
For that specific portion?
Yes, yes. We are, with the gentleman here from Camp Williams, we are working, again, to clear the corridor, working with the National Guard, working with the NSA, the data center, on property trades through there. They have some property that we have, and they obviously have some property we're interested in. The alignment in detail through there, Mountain View Corridor, if you're looking north, runs just to the west of the data center, and, I'm sorry, to the east of the data center and to the west of Redwood Road. So we go between Redwood Road and the data center. In 2008, the environmental impact statement was completed, and what it produced was a balanced transportation system, which includes a roadway system, a bicycle and trail system, 12-foot wide along the entire length of Mountain View Corridor, and a transit component system. And so the idea is to bring the roadway, the trail, and transit all along together. We need all of those modes of transportation to help people get around. We can't just build roads to get everyone around. We need the transit system to fill in part of that. So here's a Phase 1 of the roadway, 2 lanes each direction. This happens to be 4100 South. Here's southbound Mountain View, so 2 lanes each way. Everything is what we would call at grade. And so we build all these intersections at grade. And there's the trail. It looks exactly like that today. So that's Phase 1 of the roadway. Phase 1 of the transit has changed, and this is in north of Old Bingham Highway. We'll talk about south of Old Bingham in just a minute. This transit component now north of Old Bingham is an express bus that will run from the Red Line at daybreak. It will run generally along 5600 West. It will have connection to the International Center, to the airport, and downtown, and then back. It will run on 15-minute intervals. And when that gets funded, then that allows us to go to this, which is Phase 2 of the roadway. So the same location we were looking at, 4100 South. Phase 2 is we build interchanges or bridges over those cross streets. So that Phase 1 transit, the express bus, is what's needed to grade separate or build the interchanges north of Old Bingham. Go ahead.
Specifically for north of Old Bingham, correct?
Yes, exactly. I'll jump to the other here. Let's look at this for a second. So we've got 17 miles complete from 160 South, 160th to 41st. The transit, again, north of Old Bingham is unfunded. And so once we get that funded, we'll move to Phase 2 of the roadway. South of Old Bingham is a little bit different. There's also a transit component that we're bringing along with the roadway and the trail. That transit component is in place and operational. So you can kind of check that off the box. So the only remaining piece that we need, back up just a couple here. In order for us to go to Phase 2 of the roadway, south of Old Bingham, we need to connect this last piece of Phase 1 of the roadway from 2100 North to Porter Rockwell. Once we do that, then we will begin funding available, building interchanges south of Old Bingham Highway.
This is the worst question.
That's, yeah, fire them at me, yeah.
Potential timing, and I know that's largely one for the people up on the hill this next couple months, but.
Yeah, so kind of what my role is, kind of here today too, is ultimately deliver these projects with the team that we have, but is provide information to make good decisions. And we've done that for this legislative session. We have provided them information on this change in transit north of Old Bingham. We have provided them information on what we have left to do to construct this, including the range of costs for that. And the same up here is let them know, hey, here are challenges up there, here are the things we've cleared, here's what we need to do, here's how much we think it's gonna cost. So they've been, I'll say, fully armed with the information of what it will cost to build this segment down here for phase one and the segment up here to connect I-80 for phase one.
So,
Yes.
just so that I understand the sequence of how these are going to get funded. In order for them to move to phase two, do they have to complete the future construction between Porter Rockwell and 2100 South? So in order for them to continue north of Old Bingham, do they have to build south of Old Bingham first?
No. Yeah, so are you talking about phase two?
For them to start phase, because I think all of us are gonna agree here pretty strongly that the connection all the way north to south is the key for us. And I know that, all of the other cities in the area have also said that. We're pushing as mayors, I don't know if you know this, but we're pushing as mayors, we're pushing really hard in the legislative cycle to get that specific those two specific pieces funded before anything else happens, because everyone else is getting the benefit of, the economic development and the growth. On the north and the south end, we're struggling because we're kind of waiting for that disconnect to get connected so that we can participate in all of the development that comes with that as well. And so I know that in some ways this is more to update my council, is we're pushing very, very hard, and it's one of the top 3 priorities that as mayors that we've set for this legislative cycle is to try to get funding planned and programmed for those 2 specific pieces so that we can get that connection done. And so as a community and as a region in this area, we're gonna wanna see that done before any further development or, move to phase 2 on anything north of Old Bingham.
When you say mayors, are you talking the mayors on the west side?
Yes, west side.
Were you asking me funding sequencing there, or?
I think you answered it, and then I was trying to update my council, because they didn't know all of that, so thank you for indulging me.
No, absolutely, yeah. And you've seen this before, so yeah, I appreciate your time, the 3rd week in November. Yeah. So that's where we are. The key there is getting these 2 red sections complete, and that will complete phase 1 of the roadway for Mountain View Corridor. I actually drove down, our project office is Bangor Highway and 201, and I chose to take Mountain View Corridor down here. And I hadn't for a little while. I'm amazed how many people are on that roadway, and it flowed really well. It was a good choice for me getting here to see.
Well, and our residents love it taking it up north. They use it all the time. We just want to remind everyone of the huge traffic concerns we have at Redwood Road, turning left onto Porter Rockwell at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It's a mile and a half line.
Or even turning right out of Harriman onto Redwood Road.
It is beyond, normal, what you'd be expecting on a traffic level, so.
Yes, it is. That's the northbound Redwood Road to left-hand movement on Porter Rockwell. Yes, absolutely. We appreciate the amount of delay, and also the delay at State Route 73 and Redwood Road. This project will fix some of that. The other component to this project is we've got a trail underpass that will connect the west side of Redwood Road over to 2100 North. Okay, so we're bringing these transit, road, and trail components along together.
Thank you very much, appreciate that. Anybody have any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for your time.
We'll go ahead and
show.
keep moving here.
One other item.
Just real quick.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was with Riverton City Council last night.
Yeah.
Same thing, again, providing information of here's where we are, here's what we need to do to get to the next steps. One of the things that came up was the traffic accidents on Mountain View Corridor. And so one of the things that was asked was these advanced warning signals, you know, say prepare to stop, you get a red light coming. We're going to go through and look at those in Riverton, and I'll get with Blake, work with Blake a lot as soon as he gets back from sunny St. George. And if he, I'll just work with him, I'll say, hey, want to send this request, we'll go look at all of these and see if there's any we missed.
Thank you.
Okay?
I think probably the one you're gonna get the biggest push for is Mountain View and Palisade Rose Drive. That's where we had that unfortunate accident a few years back, and so that is a particular area of concern. We have quite a bit of traffic going through there, so.
Thank you. We're constantly looking at ways to improve that.
Thank you. All right, moving on. Salt Lake County Animal Services Contract Report.
Good evening. I am Carrie Seibert and this is Michelle Jones. So first we'd like to congratulate new council members and the new mayor. We'd like to introduce ourselves as a community liaison coordinator for animal services. And with me, I am your primary contact for any of your shelter needs or questions that you may have. I have come back with over 17 years of experience in the animal industry. 5 of those years I was a wildlife rehabilitator, and the rest have been with the shelter in various positions, all the way from outreach to animal care, customer care, as well as some administration and an officer. Many of you know Michelle Jones, so I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, for those that don't know me, I'm Officer Jones. The staff at the shelter know me as Jonesy because we've got a few Michelles at the shelter. The public know me as Jonesy or Officer Jones. I was the primary Harriman Animal Control Officer for about 2.5 years. I recently was reassigned about 3 months ago, but during the time that and I'm also a resident out here. During the time that I was the primary officer for Harriman, I developed really good relationships with the staff here at Harriman as well as the community. I'm very proactive on social media, and I was able to utilize social media to help get information out, get pets home, answer questions, address complaints. I've still been assigned to be the liaison for Harriman since I do have those relationships established, and I am a resident out here, so I do value the service that we provide and receive. I have been in the animal field industry for almost 20 years. I started out as a veterinary technician. I've worked in animal shelters. I've worked in emergency clinics. I've worked for the county. This is my 12th year. I am a national certified animal cruelty investigator. I'm also, in addition to that, certified as a special investigator for equine livestock for cruelty as well. Currently, the officer that is assigned to Harriman in the southwest areas is Officer Melanie Bennett. She also has 20 plus years of experience and has been with the county for a number of years. So she provides a very good level of service for the city as well, and we work very closely together.
So we mainly wanted to introduce ourselves so the public and council and the city knows that you do have good people available to you. We have a vast amount of knowledge, so any questions or needs, please contact us. I do have my card available as well, that if any of you would like that, I can provide that. So Snuggle with Pets is kind of a new thing for Harriman. We just had our first session in January, and it was a huge success. So every month on the second Friday, Salt Lake County will be out here with about 3 to 6 adoptable pets. Our coordinators that will run it is over Outreach. So they'll have program information, answer questions, and they'll also be able to license and microchip any current pets in the city. So
Just said you didn't bring one tonight.
I know. We could.
It is the best de-stress for the staff. Like for me, if I'm having a
If we
rough
all
day,
had
I'll go to the
puppies, it'd go
shelter
real
and I'll
fast.
go in our cat rooms and snuggle with the kitties. And it just makes me just forget all the craziness. So encourage the staff to at least come snuggle the kitties or the puppies for a couple minutes, because they really do kind of break up their day and help them kind of decompress and stress.
And every time we've done these at other places like the government center, we've always had at least one adopted. So this has been an amazing resource available to the community, and we're happy to bring it out to Harriman. And other programs and resources that we do have available to the community, one of them is our Building Better Behaviors free workshops. So we do partner with a lot of outside resources, and one of them is with a lot of local trainers. So we do host free dog behavior workshops at our shelter. The topics do vary each month, so you can always learn new things. And we really made this so we can offer tools to help people keep their animals in their home rather than encountering issues and not know how to correct them. If you want updates on them, or if you'd like to sign up, you can always check our Facebook or our website. We do have links to register for them. And we'll have the February workshops up shortly. Another one we have is our licensing and vaccination clinic. We'll be hosting it in Bluffdale for the entire Southwest region. So I do have flyers downstairs available to the public as well. That'll be on February 10th from 10 to 2. So all the community is welcome to come out if they need vaccinations, licensing, or even just general questions and microchips as well. TNR and Community Cats, that is another program that our shelter participates in. So this is to address any free-roaming cat within the community. It follows the Utah State Code Community Cat Act. All of these are hyperlinked, so if you click on it, you can go to the actual code. For those who can't click on it, you can simply search it and bring it up. The TNR and Community Cat program so far has been the only method that has proven to be a long-term solution. Previous methods were only a temporary fix, so you saw some benefits, but then shortly after you'd have the same issue arise over and over. On the right, we have some quick statistics for cats. As you can see, the population or the intake that we've had has gone down. A lot of that is from this TNR program. 2017 statistics we'll have shortly with your annual report. But yes, it is being effective. It is providing a lot of resources to not only caregivers, but also those who are trapping as well. So if you need trapping assistance, you can always contact our TNR coordinator, Officer Rebecca Lane. We do work with Best Friends a lot, so if you need feral shelters or cat food for caregivers that are out in the public, they can contact Best Friends. The links below, again, they're hyperlinked, are for cat deterrence or ways to kind of combat some of the issues that may arise when you're seeing cats in your area. A lot of it, you can use the tools to kind of curb some of those effects. TNR does also solve many of the nuisance problems as well. And lastly, we do want to announce our Petapalooza event. This will be in August. I know it's a ways out, but we are starting our planning for it. So we do want to throw it out there in case anybody in the community wants to be a vendor. Please contact us. This year is going to be bigger than last year. We're hoping to have over 75 vendors. We'll have food trucks, entertainment, and hundreds of animals available for adoption from us, as well as rescue groups and local animal shelters as well.
And people can just go play with the animals too, right?
Exactly. And that would be it for ours. I know we tried to rush through it since we're so short on time, but if anybody has any questions, please let us know. Like I said, I do have my card available if anybody needs it, and we do have flyers downstairs for many of the topics that we discussed.
And we definitely highlighted on the TNR tonight, because we learned through a meeting last week that there was kind of a miss on our part with communicating with new staff, or just making sure that the information was being distributed to everybody on board, and a lot of people didn't have the information about the program, and we ran into some issues that we're addressing now, and so we want to make sure that everybody's aware that this program exists, that it's effective. If you guys have questions or want a more extensive type of presentation on it, we can definitely schedule something like that, because there is a lot of information that is involved with this program.
Yes, there's a lot of aspects to it, and usually tends to get quite a few questions. I managed the program for several years, so if anybody has any questions or concerns, they can definitely contact me.
Thank you so much, we appreciate it. You're a good partner.
Thank you.
All right, trucking through these. Let's go ahead and move on to item 3.5, 2018 Black Ridge proposal. Wendy.
Okay, you all had in your packet some options for 2018 at Black Ridge. Lieutenant Reyes and Justin and I met, I don't know, about a month ago, start having the discussion about what we're going to do with Black Ridge this year, so we want it to function, especially due to the fact that the algae blooms that are occurring every year now cause us a little bit of grief. So in your packet, you had a couple of options that we put together. Our staff recommendation is to prohibit swimming at this point and just allow non-motorized small watercraft on the reservoir. That would allow us, unless the health department advised against that, if the algae bloom got too big, and they advised us to keep people off the water completely, that would allow us to continue to operate all year. The other options are listed there as well: completely close it to water access, or just keep going like we're going, and if it closes, it closes. So that's kind of what we're bringing forward to you. Any water questions, of course, go to Justin, and anything for UPD and security-wise, of course, our Chief Carr is here. So what questions do you have?
With the algae bloom, what's the severity of the health risk? Worst case scenario, horribles, what could we have happen? Death. Well, that's what I'm in some ways looking for.
The toxin that's in the algae is called amatoxin A.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Hold on.
That's how to steal. We have to keep that door open.
I can't hear, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, you close that one.
No, they can't get in if they close that door.
But when they close that, it will lock.
Apologize, I'm sorry, I just couldn't hear you, Wendy. There was a big group having a nice
Worst case
chat.
scenario is death.
Is death. What is the realistic risk to our residents?
It's more about your test.
I'll do that. Mayor Sue.
I'm sorry, I just, Brett's gonna get it.
Doesn't help that I'm losing this word. It's more of a gastrointestinal issue. You can have skin irritations, and those things are probably the most common coming in contact with the water. Those are the biggest concerns, but she is correct. Death could be a possible issue.
Is there a particular population that's more susceptible to that over?
Obviously, your young and elderly are the most susceptible, but.
As well as animals.
But they're not allowed in water.
But we receive regular, during the season, we are receiving regular updates by the agency that's monitoring that. So I mean, my initial, reaction to the proposals, is just simply, I mean, I understand the health concern, but I just think that's such a recreational asset and draw, so I hesitate to go so far as to completely eliminate, swimming there. I mean, other than it, you know, it perhaps solves an overcrowding problem that we've had in years past. That being said, I think that's just a hard hit. And it's hard to explain why we're pulling them out when in fact there's not a health risk
An immediate
yet.
risk.
Yeah, knowing of course, and I think that they are starting to understand that sadly Utah Lake has the exact same issue every season, and it may even be sooner every season, I don't know, but
Been
they're
mid,
pulling
end of
them off.
July, around the 20th of July is when we start
And then we
seeing
have
the
blooms
warnings.
even later in the year than they normally.
So is it coming, are you seeing a trend for the algae bloom to happen sooner
Yeah,
each year?
they were actually really surprised this year because of how much, how much the water level increased. But yeah, it's seasonal and depends, so if it's warmer in the spring, it's gonna start early, because it takes UV light to make it bloom, to start blooming, so.
So I don't know,
Well,
I walk back.
It's around an idea that, actually staff just pointed out to me, because we're hearing it. But we also had this plume, and it's gonna probably happen, I think the plume's always been around actually in reality, probably the last 50 years in other lakes. But they were more saying, maybe a suggestion, maybe we do swimming Monday through Thursday or something. Cause it's the weekend party crowds coming there, or change times where it allows swimming. It's really the weekend crowd that camp out all day long, that create more problem for the police, our staff, everything else. It's just, we're dealing with the plume, we thought, well.
Well, but you're talking a different problem, so I mean, you're saying something entirely different. What you're saying is you're using the health risk to solve the other problem. I'm saying if our problem, so let's separate these out. If it's health that we're talking about, of course, I think this is my personal opinion, we just continue to communicate as we've communicated. When it becomes a health risk, it's done, it's shut down. And that's the way that you deal with it. The secondary problem that you're dealing is the raucous behavior that we're experiencing. So I mean, let's deal with the two problems separate. I don't want to use the health problem to solve that problem. I want to solve both problems in the appropriate way, but just not use the health issue to solve the partying issue.
Can you, I know that we see it in our packet, but can you highlight some of the additional costs that currently the city is paying each year? One on the treatment of the algae, and Justin, if you could just kind of highlight the cost and really what's that do? If ultimately at the end of the day, that's not keeping that clear enough to let people swim in it, then one, what's your recommendation of continuing to use it, period? And just let it run its natural course, whatever that may be. And then the secondary piece of that obviously is the cost that we're incurring by having additional UPD officers up there to deal with the other issue that we're talking about. But let's talk a little bit about current costs.
So as far as chemical goes, we are treating it, and the more we're learning about the algae, we're learning, and we're doing some more investigation now on, because you have the algae and then you have the toxin that comes with it, and the algae releases the toxin into the water. The chemical we do know that we have treats the algae. We're trying to determine if it treats the toxin. Because if it's a toxin we're talking about, that's already in the water from Utah Lake. But if it treats both, then obviously we can control both. It's very costly, as you can see. It's about $25,000 a year.
Just for the treatment?
Just for the treatment. But we did still see some of the toxins in the water. That just means if we want to eliminate the toxins, we just have to dose it more heavily. We're doing more of a maintenance dose, not eradicate dose.
Is that the entire season?
Yes.
So we've continued to treat even after we've shut it
And we've
down
done
to the swimming.
Or before?
Or before, yeah.
Yes?
Yeah, we basically treat year round, and we increase or decrease our dose depending on the algae that's there.
So
we do
that's a
see,
cost we've anticipated and have been
we budgeted for.
absorbing the entire time.
Yeah.
But it might increase
don't-
if you decide that you need to increase the amount,
Yes.
the level.
And we're still, we've only been in, using it for a year and a half or so, we're still learning how much it takes to dose. If we were not gonna allow the swimming, we'd probably decrease that and more have it just an aesthetic, keep the algae off the surface of the water. We do see some other benefits to having the algicide in there, not just killing the algae, it helps with snails and other things, so. We would still use it, we might, if we used it just as a lower maintenance dose to handle those things, it might cost $10,000 a year.
What about fishing?
There's no fishing in Black Ridge.
Is that an option that we could, instead of swimming, possibly, because I've had a couple people say, I'd love to go fish up there, and maybe an alternative instead of swimming. I'm not saying that's the right, have we even looked at it?
I'm sure it's been looked at before I arrived. Justin knows that.
It has been, it's one of those things that we didn't wanna have full.
Yeah, so, but if
It
we're,
is possible.
if we're having the conversation of, do we need to stop swimming? Should we not also at the same time look at the fish as something different as an alternative,
No,
if we make that decision?
I'll chime in and say one, it's widely known, I'm not a huge fan of swimming at Black Ridge. So I'll preface my comments by saying that, but there is that sandy area where even if there's no swimming, there's still gonna be people playing in the sand, toddlers, etc. We don't want fish hooks and I enjoy fishing, but the two just aren't really compatible. I mean, whether it's the hooks, the line, I mean, everything that comes along with it, it doesn't create an environment to play in the sand. And even with no swimming, you can still wade in the water, you just can't go swim. So there's a lot of activities that could still go on that relate to playing in the water and the sand.
How do you possibly, so your proposal is non-motorized use, but no swimming. Such a fuzzy line there. I mean, I fall off of my paddleboard, probably because I'm inexperienced, and all of a sudden I'm swimming. I mean, then it becomes, doesn't it become then an enforcement nightmare for you to say, you can have your tube out there, but don't swim? I think that's a challenge. It seems like it's either all or nothing.
Ochre Lake operates in the same kind of way. There's no actual swimming. You can wade up to your ankles. Paddleboards and canoes are allowed, and they have people that are there enforcing that.
And they don't find it to be a huge.
I'm sure that they have people that fall in, but yeah.
Well, and I think there's a lot,
There's a difference between the person that has a board out there that falls in and swims back to shore versus 10 people out there cuddled
ultimately,
around
we
with a
can't
table.
control people in public space from doing stupid stuff.
Oh my gosh.
Black Ridge is Exhibit A.
I think we're gonna have to, we've got just a couple minutes before our next
We
meeting.
need a decision soon on this
So-
though, because regardless of what this looks like, there's an education element that has to go forward, no matter what you do. I mean, I think it would be helpful to start educating on the fact that, there's gonna be an algae problem. I mean, even if it's situation normal, there's the
Anticipate this
discussion
being
of,
annual.
yes, of the disappointment that happens when it closes, because inevitably there'll be an algae issue. So, and then if you go with the proposal that staff is suggesting, there's a huge education to manage the disappointment of what was a neighborhood draw for the children is now all of a sudden not, and why. And so, the sooner rather than later on this decision is really
If you
important.
watch the last few years, the public is getting more educated on the algae and the toxins. In fact, they found it in Wanship and Smyrna Lakes that didn't have it before. I've always been around lake my whole life, all these lakes. I think there's always been algae, for the record, especially Utah Lake. Toxin, I think it's always been there as well. When that first dog died and they diagnosed it with toxin, that's when it started raising a higher risk. I didn't know about testing it, we know how to mitigate some of the issue, make sure it doesn't, we keep the levels down, but in reality, they can happen in any reservoir. Sure. And
They didn't have the t-shirts of Ski the Scum for Utah Lake in the late eighties and early nineties for no reason.
Affectionately refer to it as Jello Lake.
So I'm saying, we
Just saying.
I think we're here where you're saying, we'll let the
Well, so what,
testing.
what is the thoughts? Cause I've
No,
been
I support their proposal.
of no
Where I'm
swimming.
I think,
I think there's a lot of activities that can go on, wading and playing in the sand, all that stuff can happen without people swimming, and
Right.
then we do away with a lot of the drowning potentials that we've experienced and all those sorts of things.
Yeah, that's definitely better than.
I think, I agree with what you said, but to Nicole's point earlier, I think it would be a pretty radical, abrupt deviation from what has been known and been expected up there. And again, I think we need to look at it a little bit more in terms of, look at some of those costs. I'd like a little bit more information just on the parking permit program. We've talked about some of the crowds and some of the things that are up there. Has the way that has been implemented been effective? Which I hear that it has. So I think some of those issues that we've faced in the past, we've found some fixes for them. And again, I think that we need a little more exploration on some of these other things up there. But again, if we just go to the simple fact that we're gonna educate people and let them know, look, we've had algae problems in the past, we can probably anticipate continuing those and anticipate at some point during the year that we're gonna close the facility to these types of things. But I don't know if I'm ready to say, do it completely right now.
What about a poll? I mean, one of the as I understood it, one of the reasons that we went with was so that we could do these little spot polls. I mean, I would dare say there's been very few more controversial issues than Blackridge. So for me, it would qualify to use for a survey and just get some sense as to where the public falls on these kind of safety issues versus use issues, and would give us some guidance as to where to go with this.
What I'd want to identify is the areas of the city that data is coming from too.
Yeah, and it needs to be representative.
Right, because we definitely know that certain areas of the city are gonna have certain views of how that should be used and the way they would like to see it.
Yeah, because you are going to get a different slant from those that are right around it.
Absolutely.
I mean, frankly, they may see this, but I'm very interested to know, but they may see this proposal as a nice means of solving other issues.
And we
Which
also
of course
know
it
that even though we signed it no swimming last year and we closed it, people still swim.
So here's what I might suggest. I would like some additional, information as we look towards what we're actually gonna do to come back to us through staff, possibly doing a survey. I'm totally supportive of that. And I'd also like just a little bit of input from UPD and UFA as well, get your actual opinion on what kind of resource use that is for you. I know that we've had a couple of drownings, we've had some major incidents up there, so just having all that information so that when we come back in a few weeks, or as soon as you can reasonably get that to us, that we can have a little bit more informed and educated discussion. Does anybody have any issues with that?
And Justin, also, if you can help us understand a little more clearly
Just they need some clarification.
how much more
Exactly.
chemicals are we gonna need to put into the
And so
water?
hopefully we can-
What are these chemicals, how do they affect people? Sometimes people freak out about a lot of chemicals in their water too. Cause if they get in there and their kids fall down in the water, even if they're not swimming, it goes in their mouth.
Allergy.
Certainly eliminates problems with swimming.
So anyway, but just, do the chemicals treat the toxins, that kind of information that you're talking about, that you didn't know, we can start having some answers to those questions too.
Such a
I'm not
recreational.
Do I need a motion to
Yes.
leave?
Motion to adjourn the city council work meeting.
A motion?
Actually, we're not adjourning it.
No, when we get in the meeting, we come back.
We need to come back in.
Jared's adjourning it. It's not
Okay,
happening.
so we're
Adjourn to convene our regular city council
You guys are out of
meeting.
line.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Absolutely. Can we, yeah.
You have our full, support for that.
And for the record.
I know.
Yes, we will be back. We still have to leave that if we don't do it now.
They're proven to be,
We just don't conversate. That'll be done.
Are you?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You're
Hey, that's from Hercules.
Alright.
Saw it on the agenda, so I was
Justin,
checking to see
yeah.
how much.
It's the state of Vermont.
There's no idea how long it is.
Yep.
No, there's not.
There's not a closed, okay, it was on the agenda.
We presented this budget for our police district at the last meeting. And we're on schedule tonight to do a public hearing and for the council, or for the board to adopt the budget for the Harriman City Safety Enforcement Area. Just to recap, we're budgeting that we'll receive $2.5 million from Slovisa as our portion of the fund balance. Our contract for this year with UPD will be $2,085,000. Legal and finance within the city will be $17,500. Then our UPD precinct has requested an additional traffic enforcement officer that will actually be used for other things as well, for $70,315. Traffic enforcement equipment of $17,200. Directed enforcement of $15,000, and special events of $19,095, for a total of $2,224,554, which should leave us at June 30th a fund balance of $275,446. So that's the recap of the budget that's been presented. We now should open for a public hearing. Once the public hearing is completed, the board should act on the budget, whether or not it's just as this is, or may make any adjustments or changes that they would like to make to it.
Okay, so any comments from the public on this item? Anyone? Anyone? Seeing none, we'll entertain a motion to close.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Do you do roll call or just, all right. Roll call vote, Nicole?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. So we close the public hearing. Any discussion amongst council? Maybe just clarify for those in attendance that aren't aware of what's going on. This is the Harriman City Safety Enforcement Area is brand new. We prior to this, we were part of the Salt Lake Valley Law Enforcement Service area. So on your property tax bill, it would show for your taxes for public safety would go directly to that body. We, Harriman, Riverton, and unincorporated, guys correct me if I'm wrong, and unincorporated Salt Lake County are part of that taxing district. They collected the funds, and then that board, which consisted of 3 members from the county, 1 member from Harriman City, 1 member from Riverton, decided how many officers were allocated to each area. Over the past couple of years, we in Riverton especially had kind of seen an inequality in the decisions made as far as that coverage goes, and we wanted more control over not only the funds, but then the corresponding coverage that we're receiving from law enforcement. So we've decided to break away from that taxing district and create our own. So on your property tax bills, you should see, instead of that, Slovisa is what we called it for short, you'll see the HCC for short. So you'll see the same taxing notice, everything, but now we have control of those funds and will contract with UPD for a certain number of officers, et cetera. Hope that makes sense.
The other benefit of going this direction was as other cities came on to the Slovisa, horrible acronym, then our vote became watered down as well. And so again, for local control, for the ability to make sure that we were using those funds for the needs that we had, this was really by far the best direction for us to go.
So this is just part of that process. We have to adopt an official budget. As you can see, we're receiving funds from that taxing body come in, and then going forward, we'll have that as well. And I think Alan had mentioned in the previous meeting, we'll go through the truth in taxation, et cetera. We'll announce the tax rate, which I think we anticipate keeping the same. So there shouldn't be any surprises that way, but just a difference in local control. Good? Any discussion? So entertain a motion?
I move that we approve resolution number R18-05, approving the final budget for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2018.
Oh, sorry, Jackie, do we have to? Oh, no, okay, sorry. Going through, I'm reading all the red lines of the steps we have to go through. We did that part, so now we need that motion, thanks.
I'm good.
Sorry, Mayor.
Okay.
I will second, did you finish?
I didn't finish. Year beginning January 1st, 2018 and ending June 30th, 2018.
Now I will second.
Got a motion and a second. Call for the vote. Sherry?
Yes.
Mayor?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
Nicole?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. That motion passes. Move on to 3.1, discussion and consideration of Harriman City Safety Enforcement Area policies and procedures.
One of the requirements for a district is to have policies and procedures. So you have in front of you policies and procedures, basic set. If you have any questions, I can answer them.
They were very well done, John.
Thank you.
Motion?
I'll motion to approve resolution number R18-06, approving the board meeting policies and procedures.
Second?
Motion and a second. Call for a vote. Nicole?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
Mayor?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
I'll vote yes. That motion passes.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
That was fun, Scouts,
Second
wasn't
vote.
it?
Do I have to
That was a
call?
party.
Do I have to call for a vote on that, Jackie?
Okay.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you, Councilman Henderson. So that was a meeting that we had to have before this one, because that's the way we noticed it. So now we get to actually have our council meeting. So thank you for all being here. So I'm gonna go ahead and call the general meeting of the City Council to order. Today we're going to start with Scout Troop 1530, who is gonna do the Pledge of Allegiance for us. So go ahead and take it away.
Color guard forward march.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. We always appreciate our Scout troops and any other of our youth organizations that want to come and participate with us. So thank you very much for all being here. Just so that we can all see, how many in here are Scouts? That's quite a few of them. Awesome. Leaders too, how many leaders brought them? Let's see, yeah.
It's the only time we have an audience.
I'm calling out the leaders because awkwardly my father-in-law is here. So, I just wanted to make sure he felt embarrassed. If I made him stand up, he'd never talk to me again. All right, so item 1.2, counselor disclosures for conflict of interest. Are there any conflict of interest that need to be disclosed by our council for tonight's meeting? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. 1.3, mayor and council comments and recognitions. I'd like to start by having Chief Carr come up for just a moment and discuss some of the issues that happened this weekend. I assume everybody knows what happened this weekend. Has everyone heard what happened today? Okay, so Chief Carr will talk to us about everything that happened.
Mayor and council, let me just grab my notes here. As you all know, Saturday. Okay. I don't want to drop that on the floor. Thank you. Give me just 1 second, if you would, please. As you know, Saturday, our communities of Riverton and Harriman were rocked by an event that took us a little bit by surprise. One of our sergeants that was on duty during proactive patrol ran across an individual that fired at him when he tried to stop him. That same individual, moments later, took the opportunity to shoot at another officer that was responding as well, who happened to be off duty, nearly striking him. And that same individual then broke into a house and shot the homeowner several times. All of those events culminated into an officer-involved critical incident, and that critical incident then spawned a incident command here at Harriman City in coordination with the Riverton City. We soon learned that Salt Lake City Police Department was going to take over that investigation, as is required by state law that an outside agency investigate that critical incident. As those things progressed throughout the day, we met with the local leaders of both cities and with the police department of Salt Lake City. We learned that it was Justin Gary Llewellyn that we were looking for, and that he was actively evading us through techniques that were being provided to him by his family. We spent several days actually looking for him, and let me reference these. The Unified Police Department, that Saturday morning, had 7 precincts and 9 divisions that came to Harriman City, totaling 95 police officers. 12 other agencies within Salt Lake County responded to assist us with 77 people. One of those agencies was the FBI. That morning we had 172 officers in the city of Harriman looking for Mr. Llewellyn. UFA Fire Department, one of our partners, came to us with about 12 personnel throughout the course of that day, and their role is to back us up in the event that we have another incident and somebody is injured. If you would, Mayor, would you like me to proceed through the rest of the events? Okay. Please. As the investigation took place, Salt Lake City was the primary investigative unit. The information that they had was that there were 3 people out here, family members, that were assisting his evasion of us and his capture. We, as the Unified Police Department, put on our apprehension team, the Major Investigations Unit, and took over the process of looking for this individual. Salt Lake City Police Department continued their efforts to investigate it, as well as take away his support system. This resulted in 3 female family members being arrested. And that happened on January 23rd. That process started at about 1 p.m. in the afternoon, and as many folks here might have been impacted by that, caused 3 schools to be locked down. The lockdown wasn't such that it was a threat in the school or to the school specifically, but more specifically, it was around that area. And what we wanted to prevent was the schools being released while we were having a police action. It came to a point where we had 2 of the 3 individuals in custody. Keeping in mind, we didn't know if Gary Llewellyn was with these people we were looking for. The 3rd, not being in custody, I decided to lock down Blackridge Elementary, Fort Harriman, and Foothills in Riverton, with coordination with Chief Peterson down there. All of this culminated in a very short lockout period that resulted in what we believe to be the overabundance of caution that we should have used when it comes to the safety of our children. What we didn't want to have is the children out on the street walking home and an unfortunate police action take place that they were involved in. Later that afternoon, we had all 3 of those females in custody. Salt Lake City Police then began their investigation on those 3 individuals. 2 of them were booked into the Salt Lake County Jail. From there, we learned that today our apprehension team, the Unified Police Department's apprehension team, received information that Gary Llewellyn may be in Provo. They responded to the area and facilitated an apprehension team with the local authority, Provo, and it resulted in a pursuit down through to Spanish Fork, where it was ultimately terminated and he was taken safely into custody. There were no injuries. As far as I know, when we stepped into our meeting, and this was very fluid today as we began our city council meeting, that he is currently back to the Salt Lake County Jail. Our apprehension team transported him back. We will have to wait and see where the investigation goes. As Salt Lake City feeds us that information, hopefully we can get it to you. So, and I recognize that there were some frustrations throughout this process. Just know that in an effort to prevent misinformation, we try to slow it down and make sure what we are sending out is verified.
So we'll just keep you up here for a second.
Sure.
I want to make a few comments regarding the events of the last couple of days. I was involved with much of what was going on, and in cooperation with Salt Lake PD and with Unified Police Department and the Sheriff's Office, we had to make decisions that concerned the safety of the residents of our community. I know very well that our residents were frustrated at many moments with the lack of information that they were receiving at the time. However, the priority at the time was to keep our residents as safe as possible, and part of that was restricting information that, since we know the individual is being actively assisted, restricting the information that those individuals would have so that the police department could do their job. I have full confidence in Unified Police Department and the job that they did. They were a fantastic partner, and they brought this resolution to an end today, which has been making a lot of people very nervous for several days. Now that we've had that information made public, I'd like to let everyone, make sure that we reemphasize that the lockdown at the schools was out of safety for our children. It wasn't that there was a direct threat. It was to make sure that we weren't sending our youth into a situation where they could get hurt. And Chief Carr made that decision, but I back him on that decision 100%, and I would do it again in a heartbeat if we were in the same situation as I know Chief Carr would do. The safety of those around us are what their priorities are, and we understand the inconvenience and the frustration and the fear that so many people had, but we ultimately have been able to bring this back to a positive resolution with no loss of life. And I credit that directly to Chief Carr, to the officers here in the Harriman Precinct, to all of the agencies that participated, including the FBI, the 177 officers, or however many it was, that it's probably more, and also to Harriman City staff. We were able to locate the Incident Command Center here in our building, and I cannot tell you how many places I've heard from the sheriff, from chiefs, from fire, from pretty much everyone that was involved at how amazing our staff was in making sure that our officers were taken care of so that they could do their job. Specifically, I know the chief has mentioned a couple of times, a request was made of one of our staff, of Wendy, to get food out to our officers who had been out laying in the snow, our SWAT guys, laying in the snow for 4 hours. And within just a few minutes, she had moved everything that needed to be done to make that happen. And that is a reflection of how amazing our staff is, particularly in times of crisis. I know that a lot of individuals are still upset with the information and the flow, but ultimately, we had no loss of life, and I cannot do anything but congratulate UPD for what they do. And I would hope that all of us would take a moment to simply, and I know most of them aren't here, but to simply give them a quick round of applause to say thank you for what they've done.
Mayor, if I could just echo, Harriman is truly one of the most communicative and transparent cities in the state, frankly. And so if there ever is a time in which we are releasing information in what appears to be a slower fashion or is perhaps not as comprehensive as one might want, there's a reason for it. And I think judging on the amount of communication that comes out of this city on a regular basis, it becomes very apparent that there's a reason that we chose to be very succinct and careful with our messaging, and it will always be for the safety of the community. and for the integrity of the investigation or the incident in which we're dealing with. And so I commend our staff, frankly, for their brevity in this instance and for looking to the experts' guidance in the messaging choices that were made. Heaven forbid that in the interest of trying to be communicative to the degree that the citizens think we need to be communicative, creates a larger public safety issue or a death of an officer or a citizen, shame on us. So there are times when we choose to scale back our communication, and it is solely based on the recommendations of those who know better. And then, of course, we explain that after the fact. But this was handled beautifully in my estimation in terms of communication, certainly in terms of the response. And so I think kudos across the board. Thankfully, we have a resolution that is positive. But again, communicating in such a way as perhaps was desired could have made this turn into something that none of us would like to see at the end of the day.
Mayor,
If I can, one of my core values is transparency. You all know that, and it's a value and principle that I hold all my officers to. Just know that that transparency piece, that communication, wasn't withheld with any malice. It was simply for the safety of our officers and really for the safety of the community and the integrity of the investigation. So thank you very much.
I'd like to echo everything that's been said, and in addition to that, just offer my sentiments to the family that was affected very grievously by this crime. How grateful I was to hear that he's home and that he's going to recover from these things. He's going to pack inside of his body the wounds from this, and not only in his body but in his mind. These kind of things are difficult to get through when you're victims of these types of crimes. But how grateful I am, and we all are, that he is home and that he will physically recover from this. We're very grateful for that.
Yes, and I do think that we have a healing process in the community now that needs to take place. When I met with the principals today, it was very clear that there was a healing process that was needing to take place with even the children in our community. This was a very widely dispatched story, even throughout the nation that morning. And so for our community to heal from this, I think we need to stand ready to assist with that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Chief, I also just want to echo, obviously, my thanks to you and your staff and your entire department for the way in which they handled this situation. My thoughts really are what you just echoed, and that is this was a traumatic event for our community. It's one that it's easy to say, well, that type of thing can never happen, in my community. And unfortunately, we've had that type of event now here in our community, and it's a good opportunity for us to all stop and think and have those conversations within our own families and households and schools of what exactly it means and what we can learn from that moving forward. And so I appreciate the fact that you mentioned the healing process and the communication that needs to take place around that now, because I think that the takeaways from this is more important than the actual event itself. That being said, I want to just remind everybody that we live in a fantastic community. We live in a safe community. These things, we hate to see them. They are possible, but thankfully they are rare. And we need to be very appreciative of the fact that we all look out for one another in this community, and that we have a tremendous police force to help us continue to do that. So I echo my sentiments there and my thanks. One question I did have for you, and it may help just for the public to have a little bit of understanding. You mentioned state statute and what is required in this type of an incident. Right. Really, we had to pass off everything from the time that incident, the initial actions of that incident, to another jurisdiction. Right. And I think that was a little confusing, really, to some of why that had to take place. And honestly, maybe legislatively, those are some things that we need to look at, how that affects a community moving forward, and the ability for you who have most of that intimate working knowledge in a community, how to ensure that is still intact as you deal with these types of things.
Right, and to be quite frank, it really is, that too is a process of transparency that I think our public both deserves and expects. that transparency piece to say that I have full faith in my agency that we are a very professional organization and very honest, and that we could investigate that without any conflict. However, it does send, in my opinion, the right message to say that for this instance, we're going to let another agency, and we need to have our own healing process too. We had 2 officers that were nearly murdered. So we need to have that process and that assistance as that moves forward. But it does come with its own set of frustrations and technical difficulties, if you will, in getting information. I want to get that information for our community, and that assisting agency, for their own integrity of their own investigation, doesn't always provide that. So we were starting to learn how to work through. This is a very new law. It was from 2015. We actually operated under a very similar interlocal agreement, which actually spawned the state law in this county. So it was modeled after that. But you're right, it does have its, we're learning how to navigate it, would be the best way to put it. So
I think this is a good opportunity for all communities to look at what happened here and to be more prepared for future experiences.
Correct. And always be vigilant. One of the things I noticed from our community that you probably don't see very often was the amount of calls we received about suspicious people. Now, the people that were probably reported aren't happy that we stopped them, but it's a testament to our community that they're going to stand fast, be vigilant, and if they see something, they're going to say something. We are just a very few set of eyes, but knowing that we got all those calls, even through right up until I walked into council, we were still getting suspicious people. I think it was a great thing that was happening. It was our community stepping up and saying, not here, not anymore, and that we're going to contact the police when this happens. And please send that message. Never hesitate to call us. I know there's a lot of, well, we don't want to bother the police. We're here to be bothered. Let us know, and we're more than happy to go out and check things out. So, and I'm very happy with my officers that morning. I'm very happy that an officer stopped him instead of a citizen going to work, running across him. So.
Chief, one point I just want to highlight too. So yeah, absolutely, we're a safe community. One element that you've mentioned, and frankly is mirrored across the valley, is property crimes. And so to your point of when you see something suspicious, while we are lucky that we don't have a community that has these violent crimes, we certainly are, like many other communities across the county, that do have an issue with property.
We do.
And so maybe you could just speak to that.
We really do. We're a city that is growing, and we're a city that is building. And with the growth in the building creates property crimes, to be quite honest. People come out here to steal wire, and one of our other issues is that there may be a sense of complacency in our community where we feel like we're just that safe.
How many of you scouts have a garage door that you think is open right now?
Anybody leave their garage door?
Anybody have a garage door open that they think is open right this moment? Oh, pretty good. Nope. Oh, there's one. He's honest. Good job.
Very good. And we find those at night, and we knock on doors and tell them, hey, your garage door is open for a lot of reasons. One, to let them know it's open, but mostly to prevent a theft from happening. So as those issues are brought to our community, sometimes the larger issues come with them. And in this case, our officers were looking for the person that had been, or persons that had been committing these property crimes, and we ran across Mr. Llewellyn. So again, with those smaller crimes comes something that could have been very tragic. Again, if we can, these are last year's statistics, but out of, I think less than 3%, and I'm trying to recall now, I think less than 3% of the vehicle burglaries, the cars were locked. And about 7% of the home burglaries, the doors were all locked and there was forced entry. So a very, very small amount of forced entry. When they do this, they walk around and check doors. And if the car's open, we've had guns in cars and things that were left unsecured. So those are the kind of things that cause us the greatest concern. If we are vigilant in our society, in our community, we lock those cars up, we lock our houses up, we take our garage door openers out of our cars that are parked in the driveway because they can't fit in the garage, and we keep those inside, because that really is one of our biggest issues is the home burglaries from a vehicle. Press the button, you're in the house. So if we can secure our property, we will see a sharp decline in those cases that bring crime to our community. So, but we are very much a property crime-based community. Our violent crime out here is very, very low. We are a very safe community.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Chief. scouts and all of the youth and public out there, how many of you have ever been in a situation where you felt something was wrong? You could just kind of tell. It's okay, raise your hand. I've done it. I did it on Sunday. I would encourage you, when you see something that you think is wrong, tell someone. It's not always right for you to go in and address it, but it's always helpful to tell someone. On Sunday, I called our police chief because there was something that I was worried about and concerned about. It turned out to be something that hopefully made a difference. But I didn't do it myself. I can handle myself, but I let the police do their job, but I called and made the call, and that's what started getting that situation resolved. So I would encourage all of you to, when your spidey senses go off, tell someone. And once again, I want to just to cap it off, again, thank you. Please send the best to those officers. Our thoughts and prayers are for them, as well as the family that was victimized with the shooting. And please continue to stay safe. And you have, I think I speak for all of us in saying you have our full confidence that you will continue to do such as you did over the last week. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
It has been a long journey, but with your support, we were very, very successful today.
And now you get to go home and get some sleep.
It's been very few hours of that over the last
Can you,
several days.
real quick, one last thing, can you just maybe, if you are okay with it, tell me no if that's an issue, can you delve into some of the response that has been in the city for the last little while?
Yeah, actually, I'm fine with that. We took some steps Sunday night for Monday morning, and that was to make sure that we have officers at the schools. Now, originally, that caused some concern that there were cars out there with their lights on. What we wanted to do was send the message of comfort to the community. Your officers at your schools, overnight, we've had extra patrols on. Some of it was for the larger amount of call volume that we're receiving from suspicious vehicles, which went up dramatically. But another piece of that was to make sure that our community was comfortable in sleeping through the night, knowing that we were out watching. Again, the last 3 days I've been out high-fiving the kids in the crosswalks. It's been a lot of fun in that regard. Got some interesting feedback, and that's where I recognize that we have some healing to do, even with our children. And I think that the children have seen so much of this on the news that it was a startling event for them. And probably from the perspective of your own children, you may have heard some interesting review of that. For me, it was an eye-opener that we are in information technology, and these kids are very, very tuned in. So again, to your point, be very careful what we put out so that we don't cause undue or unnecessary stir in the community. But we have had extra patrols out, significant extra patrols. I've hoped that the community sees that and they've been able to take some comfort and get some sleep at night, knowing that we're taking care of you.
Thank you very much, Chief. And I'll just echo that. I've seen it. I know it's been out there, and I know it was hard not to have that communicated out to you, but that was part of the plan to catch a bad guy. And so we appreciate your patience. We appreciate your courage in a lot of ways. And we look forward to continuing to have this amazing city that we have. So thank you very much, Chief. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments from the members of the council?
Just on a different subject.
Sure, absolutely.
I just wanted to report that the youth council was able to attend the meet up with the legislature today, and several of us were able to attend with them. It was great. There was 22 of our youth council that was able to participate out of 24, so there was good attendance by them and had the opportunity to learn. And just a reminder that the legislature is in session currently, so it's incumbent upon all of us to watch what's going on up there. And if you have questions or concerns about things that are happening there, to please reach out to our legislators.
They actually like seeing you guys. It's fun. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to the fun part of the meeting, which is the part that the public gets to come up and talk to us about whatever they want. So we're going to go ahead and have our public comment section. Audience members may bring any item to the mayor and council's attention. Comments will be limited to 2 minutes, and there should be a clock that will go up on the screen there for you. State law does prohibit the council from acting on items that do not appear on the agenda. So you can bring up an issue, and we might direct you to staff to help answer a question,
or we might say that we'll talk about it later, but we can't act on it tonight because we want to make sure everybody has a chance to come in and comment about that particular issue. So if you have a comment or an issue that you would like to come discuss, we'd invite you to come up and come to the podium, state your name so we know who you are, and tell us what you want to tell us. So we'll open that up at this time. I'm gonna sit here awkwardly till one of you scouts gets up. There we go.
My name's Morgan, and on Saturday, I was like so panicked because I didn't know like if the murderer was gonna come into the church that we were at for Scouts.
Thank you for sharing that. We appreciate that. And we understand that that was a hard thing for everyone. So thank you for sharing that, because I think that helps everybody else know that, hey, it's okay to be a little bit scared sometimes. I promise, I was terrified. Absolutely terrified. Just ask Chief. So.
Hi, my name's Chase, and I was just wondering about the lockdown and lock-ins yesterday. Why wasn't Providence Hall Charter School on those lock-ins and lockdowns? Because that's really near that.
The reason we didn't the reason we specifically locked down the 3 schools, those were what we call an area of operation. The area of operation that involved the 3.
Chief, just for the public watching online, would you mind standing at the mic?
Specifically to talk about the lockdowns in those 3 specific schools, it was our area of operation for the 3 arrests were specific to certain areas. We knew that Providence Hall was outside of that area. In fact, we had officers between our arrest area of operation and the rest of the city, very specifically for that reason. So those 3 schools, to draw a picture, were directly related to where we thought those 3 people would be. And so that's why they were.
Very much.
Thank you.
That. All right, is there anybody else that'd like to make comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public comment at this time. We'll go ahead and move on to item 3, Mayor and Council Board and Committee reports. I would just like to report to the council that I have been meeting with some of the mayors from the other cities in the western area in regards to some of our legislative priorities. We spoke about Mountain View Corridor in the work meeting and trying to get that connected so that everybody can get all the way down to I-15 via Mountain View Corridor. And there's a couple other priorities, but the focus right now is our state legislation. So I just want to make sure that our board is aware of that. Does anybody else have any reports they'd like to make?
A quick report after my recent appointment to the sewer board, was able to attend our first meeting there, and still learning obviously a lot about the sewer industry. It's one of those services that I think honestly we all really take for granted. We know that in our homes we turn on faucets, we flush the toilets, whatever it may be, and it goes down the drain in a way, and we really don't think about it after that. So it's been really an eye-opening experience already for me just to be part of that board, and I'm very impressed with those that run that facility, are tasked with overseeing it, the planning that has gone into it, the planning that they have moving forward. One of the biggest challenges facing us on the sewer front is really the proper disposal of the waste that they extract from all of the water that they process that comes into that, and how there's only certain landfills that will take that, and there's immense amount of pressure currently within the valley for the one landfill within the valley that does take that, for them to quit taking that. Should that happen, that will substantially increase the cost of hauling and disposing of those, because then they have to go basically out to a landfill that's significantly farther away. It'll about double our costs when it comes to proper disposal of that. So that's one of the issues that they're watching very closely. Now, in preparation for that, the sewer board is moving forward for the installation of a additional facility there that goes through actually a drying process. And this drying process significantly reduces the amount of waste that now is required to be taken of and disposed of from the site. And in fact, after the drying process, makes most of it actually classified as a Class A waste that you can actually use as fertilizer in your garden.
So it's a large undertaking, but what has really impressed me about those managing that facility thus far is that this project, which is about a $21 million project that is coming down, they're planning for, they have all the money in hand to actually cover the cost of that.
That's great.
And they're looking obviously at the future expansion of that sewer treatment plant, which most of you probably don't even know where it exists, but it's really right down in the river bottoms, and it's north of Bangerter Highway there. It's a state-of-the-art facility. But I just wanted to report on that and how impressed I am with those services that are provided to the residents of Harriman in particular, and the tremendous job that they do in looking forward to be environmentally friendly and to help keep those costs down to our community, and we'll continue to do that as a board down there.
All right, any other comments? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to item 4, reports, presentations, and appointments. We're going to start with item 4.1, introduction of the Harriman Hills Trails Alliance Chair. And Wendy's going to go ahead and take care of that for us.
Yes, Mayor and Council, I'm excited to be here tonight to introduce to you Jolynn Darton. Jolynn has been, I call her Joe, so I'm just going to say Joe. Joe has been recommended by the Trails Committee to be the new chair. This comes after the resignation of Cammie Greenhagen Jones quite a while ago. And in the next council meeting, you'll have before you a resolution to hopefully appoint Joe to that position in a formal manner. So wanted her to be here tonight so you could meet her and she can update you on what the Trails Committee is doing. Jolynn Darton moved to Utah to attend Southern Utah University, where she completed a degree in biology and chemistry. While at SUU, she worked with the DWR on several ecological projects, such as desert tortoise relocation in southern Utah. She was able to study the different biomes of Utah and has done every hike in Zions National Park. She didn't think there was anything more beautiful than the red rocks of southern Utah until she moved to the Wasatch Front after serving an LDS mission. She and her husband Jack built a home in Rose Canyon in 2004 where they raised 4 children, along with 14 chickens, 5 cats, 3 turtles, and a one-eyed dog. She loves being outside and has hiked extensively in the Wasatch Mountains and the Harriman Hills. Joe joined the Harriman Trails Committee in 2014 to help preserve the hillside that she loves through the Citizens Initiative. She is passionate about helping to create a multi-use trail system in the Harriman Hills for the enjoyment of the community. So glad to introduce her to you. She is a tireless advocate of trails and open space for public use, and I'll let her come up and speak to you.
Thank you for having me. I'm here on behalf of the Harriman Trails Committee. Just to give the new members a background, the Harriman Trails Committee was established in 2014 by Mayor Freeman to recommend and monitor the establishment of trails. As she said, Cammie was over that, and it was formed as a subcommittee under the Healthy Harriman Committee because Cammie was over that as well. I joined in 2014 when the committee realized that Harriman citizens wanted to preserve the Harriman Hills for recreational and aesthetic enjoyment. The committee started the Harriman Hills Initiative, and we spent countless hours gathering signatures, fielding questions, and campaigning for the initiative. Even though the initiative was voted down by a very narrow margin, our efforts helped Harriman secure the ACUB federal grant money. And the ACUB, for you new members, stands for Army Compatible Use Buffer Zone. Camp Williams does not want houses up on the Harriman Hills, and they're willing to pay millions of dollars to ensure that that doesn't happen. So we have all this open space now that the ACUB money has bought us, and now we get to decide what we want as a community to do with that open space. The Trails Committee unanimously elected me, or I guess supported me to be the new chair, so I'm presenting myself to you for your approval. My name, a list of new Trails Committee members, and revised ordinances will be presented to you in the work meeting on the 14th of February for your passing on the 28th. 2 members that were originally appointed by Mayor Freeman have also stepped down, Julie Gallegos and Andy Miller, and we'd like to give them an official thank you. We are replacing them with some other members who are Trails advocates, and those names will be presented to you also on the 14th. We'd also like to amend some of the bylaws to pull us out as a subcommittee and give us full committee status. We've never operated really under Healthy Harriman. We've always been our own committee, and so we would just like to be recognized as full committee. One of our duties as a Trails Committee, as stated in the bylaws, is to recommend a Trails Master Plan to the City Council and the Planning Commission. We are currently working on that plan, and we will be submitting a plan with some maps to you that we would like the City Council to consider budgeting in trails for next year. In June, all you scouts listen up, on June 2nd, we are helping with the Parks and Rec Department in the second annual National Trails Day event. So at 8 o'clock, we'll be meeting at the LDS Church on Emmeline, and we're building a new trail from Black Ridge Reservoir over to the Diamondback Reservoir. This is a half-mile trail, and it will eventually extend on the mid-mountain range of all of the Harriman Hills. So we're starting that, and we expect you scouts to be there helping us. We'll also do some trail maintenance and trail cleanup at that time, as we did last year as well. We feel as a committee that the City Council needs to appropriate more money to the Parks and Rec Department for the building of trails in the Harriman Hills. Many citizens have asked for more trails. I sat at a table at the City Hall open house, and many citizens stopped and asked me, when are we getting more trails? Your citizens are outdoor citizens, they're active citizens, and they want more trails in the Harriman Hills. Our cross-country teams use these trails. Run Great has a wonderful trail running series that they sponsor every year that brings people from all over the state to do these trail runs. And our Harriman mountain biking team is growing rapidly. In 2016, the mountain biking team had 25 athletes. Last year, the number jumped to 70, and the coaches are expecting over 100 children or students, young people, to join the mountain biking team this year. The Harriman High School mountain biking team is anticipated to be the largest mountain biking team in the state due to the high percentage of active youth in Harriman. We need to provide them a place to ride. There are exhaustive studies done on the correlation between trail accessibility and overall community health. We need to ask ourselves, what kind of community do we want? Building trails is an investment in the health of our community. Yes, there's an upfront cost, but trails are relatively inexpensive to maintain. They last for years, and they pay huge dividends in health and happiness. In seeing the need for more trails, a group of Harriman community members have partnered with the nonprofit 5013C Trails Utah to form the Harriman Hills Trails Alliance. The Alliance will actively fundraise and get donations to help Harriman pay for these new trails. So for example, say the Harriman Trails Committee submits a plan for a $50,000 trail system. These are per year, by the way. Say the Harriman City Council can only budget $30,000 that year. The Harriman Hills Trails Alliance would actively seek corporate, private, and fundraising efforts to make up that deficit. And so the Harriman Hills Trails Alliance is really just a fund that community members can go out and help fundraise to help build more trails in Harriman. The citizens of Harriman are serious about getting more trails in the Harriman Hills, and we hope the City Council will be amenable to that effort. Thank you. Oh, first of all, do you have any questions?
No, I've known you now for a couple of years because I remember the Harriman Trails or the initiative, and I look forward to what I know will come out of the committee under your leadership. So thank you very much for being willing to do it.
Thank you. We're excited about our future.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and move on to item 4.2. Before I do that, I do see the hour is approaching 8 o'clock. I don't want any of the youth leaders to feel that it is rude to step out if you need to take your young men home at any point. So please don't feel free at any time. Scouts, this doesn't mean you can leave. And they all say, yes, we're going to go.
Green light, it's on.
Green light. You're welcome to stay. Please, if you want to stay, I would love for you to stay. But I know you've got school in the morning, so be safe and keep your eyes open.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and keep moving on, so you guys are welcome to listen to the hall as we go. So we're gonna go ahead and move on to item 4.2, presentation of the branding study by Heather Upshaw.
My daughter out there.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight we have both of our consultants on the studies we have been working on since last fall. The one is the branding strategy that Cassing Andrews has been working on, and the other is the balanced economy study, which is being done by Better City. So we will start with Cassing Andrews, and I will let them introduce themselves. There's a few of them here.
Thank you. I don't know if you guys want to introduce yourselves or not, or I can introduce them. My name is John Wald. I work for a company called Lighthouse Research, and we're working with Cassing Andrews on this study. Our location, we're actually down here in Riverton, so I was very excited to be able to present, to do this study, to see the change that's going on in this corner of Salt Lake Valley. Very excited about the progress that we're seeing and to be able to present to you. I did want, obviously we have a lot of information that we could present, and we've narrowed it down into that PowerPoint presentation, but I respect your time, and I want to make sure that the time allotted, that I meet that. So is there a certain amount of time that we're hoping to stick to here so I can make sure that I cover what's most important?
You're going to get 2 minutes. No, I'm just kidding.
All right. 2-minute quick one.
10 to 15 minutes.
Perfect.
Great.
All right. Just to start you off in this study, basically what we're commissioned to do is to do a study of businesses, and with the purpose of understanding what businesses look for when either moving to a new location or opening up a new business in a location, all for the purpose of seeing how Harriman could attract businesses here, what types of businesses, and the different aspects of Harriman City that might be important to showcase to these businesses. And so in doing this, we conducted a survey, and I have to say that our office initially thought that we should just go after Amazon and just survey them a whole bunch of times to try to get their second location here in Harriman, but sad to see that no Utah cities actually made the final 20 city cut for that. But we had a lot of good responses, a lot of good and various businesses in this survey. Just to kind of go over some of these, and I'm going to skip through some of these slides, summarize them a little bit, and I kind of went over the objectives that we already had. As we surveyed these, just to let you know, we wanted to make sure we got a good mix of different businesses, small businesses, medium, large businesses. We surveyed individuals in the organizations that did have some type of a decision-making in their business when it comes to moving to a new location or opening up a new location. The area that we decided to survey from was, of course, Utah area, some of the cities or businesses here, as well as surrounding states, simply because of the likelihood of them moving to a new location that would be typically close to where they currently are. In going over some of the key findings that we found, it's interesting to notice that about 72% of the respondents have moved business locations or opened up a new business in the past, so they did have some experience with that, and we were able to dig deep into, okay, what factors went into that move, what factors do you look for now in a new location. 27% of the respondents said that they are likely to move, and they're likely to open up additional locations in the next 5 years. And this was very positive to see that there's kind of that willingness there. They're searching, they're looking out there. And in the next 5 years, obviously, if you're thinking about a business moving, that's going to be something that they're going to start researching now for future move.
What was the total number of businesses?
Thank you. It was 200 completed surveys that we surveyed here, which allowed us
How many surveys did you send out?
You know what? To get something like this, you would have probably around 8,000 or so different email blasts that went out to these individuals. And we went with the email survey simply because the effectiveness of reaching the right individual at that survey, they don't want to talk to you on the phone. It's very difficult to get a hold of them. And so we gave an email survey to allow them time when they had time to take that survey. And we got some good response from some, and we went about it in a way, like I said, to get a good mix of businesses among those 200.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And that also allowed us to do some segmentation in this survey between small and large businesses, businesses in different areas, and so forth, to try to really hone in on what would be the most likely business that would want to come here to Harriman. Some of the comments that we got initially from these individuals as far as moving to a new location and what they saw or what they would want to see in that. One person said, we are looking for an additional location. The next location needs to be in a business park of some sort, able to house 100 employees. Another person mentioned the size of the building or the vibe of the community or of the building. And those are two kind of important things that we saw in here, and that's just a few comments among many that we saw. You kind of had two different groups. You had the group that they were looking for a building already in place, and they wanted to see already what the cost would be of moving into that building, what the vibe would be of it. And then you had another group that wanted, kind of the land, wanted the space to be able to build their own location. So you did get a good mix of that, but as we were looking through here, one of our main points that we found was that kind of the Field of Dreams mentality. If you build it, they will come. And obviously there's going to be kind of a balance that you need to strike with that. People are looking to have established places, but yet those people who are building, or those entities that are building those buildings, obviously want someone to move into there right away. They want to be able to be profitable right off the start. So there's a balance that needs to be struck there between that as well as open space. Other individuals talked about an area that was fairly central to their managers and was professional and well kept. And then you had a handful of individuals that talked about the financial aspects, the neighborhood, the taxes, the incentives of coming. And so we get a good mix of different types of businesses, and we found that those were some of the main points that we took out of some of those reasons why they would want to come to an area or what they were looking for. We asked a series of questions about the important factors for them to consider, and commercial rental costs, it was interesting, that came up as our top factor. In fact, 50% of the people that we surveyed ranked that in the top 3 factors, which is 12% more than the next closest factor. So it was definitely one of the more important factors that we saw in them choosing a business location. And some of these other ones that we see, easy access for customers, the building size, the quality and age of the building space, and being close to customers. And if you break off those top 5 into 2 categories, we get again the building, rental costs, building size, age and quality of the building, so those that are already established, and then we get the other that has to deal with being close to customers and easily accessible. And we'll kind of see later on some of the feelings that people had with regards to the main highway that goes by Riverton becoming a freeway, and how that was actually a positive for many people moving forward. It increased that ease of access in their minds.
You're referring to Mountain View Corridor?
Mountain View Corridor, exactly. The plans, and I think we had it stated that by 2030 it has planned to become a major freeway by that point, and that was definitely a positive aspect for them.
Were recreational elements a factor that arose either through the administration of the survey, you bringing it up, or through an open-ended aspect where they were looking for recreational elements that might lure employees?
You know, there was definitely some feel of the community aspect, right? Whether it's the neighborhoods or some recreational. We didn't get a lot of kind of open, top of mind feelings about the recreational, but there were comments about the community, and that's definitely part of that feel of the community.
Part and parcel of that, sure.
Yeah. But you know, when we're surveying these businesses, obviously those costs and the actual business structure was definitely the most important aspects that came up for them. When we talk about information sources, it's interesting that a lot of them would go to a real estate agency, and that kind of bodes or points to that same aspect of they go to a real estate agent, and a lot of them are mentioning so that they could find the right building. Yet again, I would locate the area I wanted, then I would look up the owner on MLS. Otherwise, they were going to Google or the internet. They were Googling available office space, or they might contact a realtor that specializes in business space. So those were kind of the two main areas that they were going for, and a lot of them would double with the real estate agent. They go to Google first and then find an agent. So your avenues of these individuals finding you is definitely going through internet sources, going through those agents. So that's an important area to focus on moving forward. When they talked about their current city and what they hoped would improve, it's interesting that 23% of the individuals mentioned infrastructure or transportation, so kind of that access, the accessibility. And we kind of brought this up in a previous meeting, how these individuals in their companies, they didn't really mention public transportation high on their initial list, but they mentioned it high in what they hoped their current city could improve. And what we gathered from that is that, okay, those other aspects are more important. The cost, the building size, all of those other aspects, these are kind of nice aspects, but that their current city doesn't currently offer. And so the advantage that Harriman could have in this is making sure that you cater to those primary priorities, those other aspects that were priorities. And if you could throw information in here about the accessibility, about transit, public transit, those aspects definitely will have a pull for these individuals that don't seem to be getting it in their current city. Financial aspects came up as well as improvements. They talked about government and regulations as well. So all of these issues that didn't quite come up in our prioritized list of factors, but that were other issues that kind of popped up here as being, that would be really nice to have. We asked them after, we gave them kind of information about Harriman City, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen it in a pamphlet, a lot of the demographic information, other information about Harriman and what it can provide. We let them know where Harriman was located, and at this point they didn't know that it was actually Harriman. We're just kind of mentioning a general city. We told them that it was within 30 miles of a major airport and of a downtown of a major city. And so at this point they still don't know it's Harriman, and we asked them, based on all of that information, their likelihood to consider moving to Harriman. And this is on a 7-point scale, and you'll see that about 4.71 was the average rating there. 58% said that they are likely to consider moving to Harriman, and that likely is up on your top 2 or 3 of that scale, while 42% were not likely to consider moving to Harriman.
And at this point, again, they're answering not knowing the name of the city.
Not knowing where it is, the name. They did have a general map that showed, but we took off any indications on the map. We actually kind of rotated it so they wouldn't kind of guess. I think we did have one person in there that said that, yeah, I actually live there right now, and so they kind of recognized it, but otherwise it was blind to them, so it gave us a good idea of exactly what their opinions of Harriman were before knowing
And then,
other aspects.
and then you asked a follow-up question once they knew Harriman?
Yes,
with
yes,
the
we
same
actually
scale?
revealed that this is Harriman. It's in the southwest corner of Salt Lake Valley, and it did give us some interesting results. There were definitely some people with that they said, yeah, I'm a lot less likely because of it.
That's what I'm interested in. So when the unveil happened that it was in fact Harriman, tell me the difference in the responses, both.
Yeah, in fact, we can skip ahead to that. That's up here soon. So we asked two aspects there. One was the freeway improvement, if that would increase their likelihood or decrease, or if it'd stay the same. And there was a net increase of 28% for the freeway being in there by 2030. Definitely a positive aspect, something that they look forward to. When we had talked about Salt Lake metro area in Utah, that had a net decrease of 16%. And we kind of had some discussions about what this was, and our feeling was that it wasn't necessarily that it was specifically in the corner or in this area of Salt Lake metro area, but that it was in Utah. remember, we're surveying people from, you know, all around the western United States. And some of those companies, some of those individuals, they have a negative stigma towards moving to Utah, towards moving to some other places as well, I'm sure. But that's definitely something that for some of these people, it wasn't conducive to them wanting to come here. Definitely a barrier to try to overcome through other means. One thing that we did, in fact, we'll continue on with this because I think it's an important aspect. We took a lot of these aspects of Harriman and we looked further into those specific elements and if it was a positive aspect them or a negative aspect. And this really gave us a good understanding of what aspects of Harriman City should be focused on when presenting to certain businesses. And you can see that kind of the community aspect here with the wide range of housing options was very appealing to individuals. 77% net mentioned a positive aspect over a negative aspect. Only 2% said that's negative, and I think a lot of that goes towards individual or these companies wanting, you know, to have nice housing, but also, you know, sometimes your apartment complexes or your townhouses or other houses that kind of attract a different individual for different types of jobs and positions. The second one down there, dedicated to creating community synergy for residents and businesses. That was another one that didn't come up high in kind of the top of mind mentions, but was definitely something important to them here. Annual growth rate is 10%. That was very important to them. The median household income was up there, and you're kind of dropping off here. Interestingly, you go down to the bottom at the median age of 25 or the build out of the population. Even the small town of Pill weren't really that high on their list as far as being positive aspects relative to the others. So as you're looking at creating your messaging, your brochures, as you talk to these companies, this will give you a good idea of how to sell Riverton a little bit better to those companies.
We're gonna sell Harriman.
Or sorry, Harriman. I'm stuck in my own city here, right? Thank you. Man, that was like the biggest Freudian slip, wasn't it there? Yeah, any other questions on this?
So all of these are regardless, even though some of them are more effective than others, these are all positive aspects, correct? These are all things that would increase, possibly, you know, incentivize a company to come to our city, correct?
Yeah, in fact, you didn't have any one of these aspects where the the percentage of negative was greater than positive. You had some that were fairly close, but none that really said that that's a really negative aspect. But definitely, you know, you have all these different aspects. Being able to focus on those top ones is going to be a priority going forward.
Quick question, what do you attribute the difference between, it seems like there's a common theme of kind of the previous points about accessibility, transportation being very high on the list, and then this graph where the 7 miles of frontage along a highway, 35-minute drive to airport, those things, that's way lower on this.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's kind of one of those areas that we saw is if you're looking at the top priorities, other aspects are higher on the list. But then when we had that one that it said, what do they wish they could change in their current city? That's where the transportation was the highest. And so we felt like they were getting those top priorities for them, they were getting in their current city. It was a place that they had accessibility. It was a place that they had good, you know, a good business park or a good look to their building, or they had close to customers or whatever it was. But the one thing that they wish could change, even though it was down on their list, the one thing they wish could change was transportation and those other aspects. So it's kind of those nice to know or nice to have things, but they aren't the top priorities. Yeah, and we'll actually see, we had some analysis by certain industries, and we'll see that actually being close to downtown or the airport was more important to certain companies and certain industries than it was to others. Particularly to the technology and business industries, they were looking to be a little bit more downtown, central. Even in that environment of being in a downtown feel, it was something that was more important to them. Question? Okay, the next section, and I know we're kind of down on our time, and stop me if I'm going too long, but I feel like this is kind of the crux of what we were able to drill down to in here. We took a bunch of the questions and we summarized and combined them together to get a best potential company. And basically what that is we took anyone who's likely to move or change locations in the next 5 years. They were likely to move or open a new location in the described city, which is Harriman. Their likelihood to consider Harriman either increased or stayed the same after the freeway question or after the question about it being in the Salt Lake metro area. So all of these were positives. Anyone who qualified under all of those we categorized as a best potential company. And when we drill down those 200 companies that we surveyed, 27% of them fit as a best potential company, which I thought was excellent. You had a lot of different companies, a lot of different opinions, and you had still over a quarter of them that after they knew where you were, they knew all the aspects, they're like, yes, that's where, that I would consider that. And we did an analysis by these best potential companies, comparing them to everyone else. This page kind of shows a lot of the demographics for those best potential companies, and you can look at that in more detail as well in our report. But some of the differences that we saw that we thought were interesting, when we looked at those important factors when selecting a new location, your best potential companies gave a higher percentage than other companies to the location, as well as a high traffic area, and less of a percentage to the cost, size, and space available and accessible to employees. Now that percentage isn't large, but it is something to kind of keep in mind as you move forward. Some of the other interesting findings that we had when we gave them specific factors, those best potential companies were significantly more likely to mention the ease of working with municipal governments, and which is something that's obviously that's something that the council and that Harriman City could work towards providing that to them, and in the encouragement to get them to come to Harriman.
Can I interject for just a minute? When you're looking at best potential companies, did you, in your analysis, either before or after, at some point, look at the state's economic clusters and feed those into either whom you were targeting in your large response pool, or and my reason is the state is doing a significant outreach on certain industry clusters, and so it's helpful for us to use our efforts to target with those and see where the trending, for instance, if the state is targeting certain industries, then obviously more of those are going to come here by the means of the state effort and certainly the revenue that they have to draw them here, and then it makes it much easier for us to create an area for certain clusters. So I guess my drilling down is, did you at all look at the state's economic clusters at any point during this survey?
Not specifically, no, and the purpose, we wanted to make sure we got a good representation of all different industries and businesses in order to get a feel of the whole. The other analysis that we did, aside from best potential companies that we thought was interesting, was by the industries, types of industries, and so you'll get a little bit of that from there, but looking specifically at the states and what those what they targeted, we did not look into that necessarily. You do have the breakouts by state, and so if there's some understanding of what those states are going after, then that could give you an idea of what the analysis and what those specific states did, and we can definitely look into that in more detail if you have any questions or want us to follow up on any specifics with that.
I think just a nice next step, perhaps, is to look at the efforts of the state and how we might dovetail our efforts to those. It just makes perfect sense to try and coordinate a little bit, both with the state, well, a lot actually, with the state, and then certainly EDC Utah and those efforts, and where there are specific targets. And I know some of this is being done. I mean, I'm preaching to the crowd a little bit here, but where there's a need, for instance, for industrial parks, those types of things, manufacturing parks, where we know that there is an unmet need, and we have land out here, then again, making sure that that's where, that becomes to me a potential company because we have an asset in land that can meet a need that we know the state is targeting, for instance, to bring here. So
absolutely.
I think it's just an obvious next step to take this data and see how it dovetails with EDC Utah efforts, and go ahead.
Yeah, and we're a proponent of obviously looking at data, and it almost brings up more questions than answers sometimes, and taking that and following that up with further research, and this will give you a good starting point with those industries to then match that up to what state agencies are doing in that effect. Yes. A couple of the other aspects with these best potential companies. And it's interesting to look at kind of where they're doing their research as well. 11% of the best potential companies are looking at the area demographics and statistics, and hardly any of the other companies were. So something that was a little bit more important to them. And then you have some of the comparisons. We knew that Google, real estate agents, real estate websites, those were the top on our list overall. And you can see the comparison between the best potential companies on the left there and other companies, and how that compared. Google for those best potential companies was quite higher than for other companies. When we looked at specific aspects of Harriman City, it's interesting to note the differences, and some of these are very interesting because they weren't at the top of our list initially overall, but when you looked at those best potential companies, they kind of rose up. In particularly, the average annual growth rate of 10% was at 84%, only 66 for other companies. The median age, we saw that at the very bottom, and that kind of rose up to 56% here versus 34 for other companies. Within a 35-minute drive time of a major city rose up as well. So we're starting to drill down. We have our important factors overall, but when we really drill down into these best potential companies, we're getting a little bit better idea of exactly where they fall. When we asked them what factors would increase their likelihood to move here to Harriman, knowing the growth rate and the potential here was something that came up, and this was an open-ended question that we categorized after the fact. And obviously for other companies, you have some that just will not move here, 11%, and that's fine. You're going to get some of those companies that are stuck or have their preferences that way.
Do we have any insight as to why the growth rate is so important for these companies?
You know what? It would be interesting to look at some of those verbatim responses in this part, and it's separated out by that. There were some different comments with regards to that we'd have to look at to figure that out. Yeah. We talked about the analysis by industry, and we kind of separated it up into 4 major segments. You talked about the business or financial or technology services, blue-collar businesses, and then your consumer products or services. And then we have a lot of other industries that kind of didn't really fit into one of those 3, such as government, schools, healthcare, insurance, real estate, and such. And some of the interesting findings that we had with this, when you look at that business, financial, technology industry, they were a lot more likely to have moved to a new location or to have opened up a new business location in the last so many years. So it seems like a little bit more growth on that business, financial, and technology side. And when you looked at where they do their research, you look at the consumer products and services at 26% said that they go to Google, whereas a lot more of the business, technology, as well as blue-collar businesses, they were going to your real estate agencies for their information. When we looked at the important factors when selecting new locations, and it's kind of a large table all scattered around, but some of the things that stand out to me were the blue-collar businesses. Not much stood out for them in other aspects, but when you look at the building size, 50% of them mentioned that as being one of their important factors, as well as the commercial rental costs. Between them and business and financial and technology industries, that came up on top, whereas it wasn't much so for consumers and products and services. And this just kind of shows some more of those. And we won't go over necessarily all of these, but it'll show you kind of a good segmentation of where to focus on with each of these types of industries. When we looked at the positive aspects of Harriman, it was interesting that a lot of these aspects came up significantly higher for the consumer products and services industries than it did for other industries. You have some exceptions, like I mentioned with your business, financial, and technology industries. A lot more, larger percentage of them were mentioning the drive time to a major city or a major airport. And likewise, with your blue-collar businesses, the small-town appeal was something that was significantly higher for them. And it was actually interesting for those individuals, it seemed like they weren't as interested in that freeway being put into place. They liked that smaller town feel. They did like the open space, but they liked that smaller town feel around that Harriman could provide. We kind of get that here with the highway question and becoming a freeway in 2030. Any questions? A lot of data to go through, a lot of information, and we can obviously provide you with more if there are any questions that arise after this.
Heather, did you understand that? Good.
That's a lot of very comprehensive data, though, that I appreciate the work that you guys have put into this. I think that gives us at least a good understanding of the types of businesses and the key components that they're looking for, and how, as you mentioned earlier, how we best go about selling ourselves and attracting them to our community, and that's what we're looking to do. So,
thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, we will move on to balanced economy study. 4.3 presentation of balanced economy study. Heather Upshaw.
Okay, so now we have Better City here to present the balanced economy study, where they're at so far. And Kelby, are you presenting?
Yeah, I'll start out.
Okay.
All right, my name is Kelby Bashard. I'm the CEO of Better City. Along with me tonight is Josh Dustin. He's one of our senior project analysts. We're grateful to be here. Harriman's a wonderful city. It's an exciting time to be here. As we were diving into the balanced economy question, there's a lot of really exciting things going on. And we were blown away by the staff. They're on top of things, and they understand the challenges, they understand the opportunities, and there's a lot of really good things that are going on. So we're gonna provide maybe a healthy dose of reality in terms of what the economy, we think the balanced economy looks like for this area. But overall, things are exciting, and you've got a wonderful staff that's helping to guide the ship. A little bit about our firm. We were founded by the former mayor of Ogden, Matthew Godfrey, who had orchestrated one of the biggest, most well-documented turnarounds in municipal history. Right now, we have a diverse team. We work in 11 different states, and we do everything from strategic plans to project feasibility studies. So really, we work very closely and intimately with cities, trying to understand how to grow their economies. A couple things, out of Ogden, Utah, our founder, over the time that he was in office, brought in $1.3 billion in investment. 6,000 jobs were recruited in or created, 150 acres redeveloped, 60 acres are still currently underway, and Ogden led the nation in job growth in 2011. In that momentum, and as well as we've taken that and continued that success after he left office, and now we're a consulting firm. The success of Ogden and some of our recent work has been noted in a number of national publications. But we'll jump on to the important part, which is really the goals, and the goals that were outlined by the staff and that we were set to task in terms of what to accomplish with this study. And the main goal is to really understand and evaluate the city's balanced economy potential. Not just what it looks like today, but what is the future potential for us having that balanced economy. Right now we're in that growth trajectory, so things are really in flux. We've got a lot of unique challenges because of that growth, but what are things gonna look like, when we're at population? And how are we gonna do that? So we approach that by estimating the city's future build-out demand for commercial space, office, for retail, looking at land or space allocation and land uses in cities that are comparable to Harriman, as well as looking at other major retail and office parks throughout the Wasatch Front. And really, that's where that healthy dose of reality comes in, looking at what do we look like in comparison to some of our neighbors that are more built out, and what can we expect in terms of what our revenues are going to look like, what our land uses should be to be able to support that balanced economy. And that's the focus of tonight's presentation, because that really leads into what comes next, which is identifying the specific projects that are going to help us create that balanced economy. So we started out by looking at what are the comparable communities, and the most natural place that we started was looking at your neighbors that are the fast growing but also very proximate communities. So those ones were the natural fit, and we ran these by the staff, and these are the ones we came up with. But South Jordan, Riverton, Bluffdale, and Saratoga Springs, all pretty close, have similar circumstances, and we looked at budgets, revenues, regional market share, and all sorts of things. We won't go through all the details right now. We're just going to kind of highlight a couple key areas for the sake of time. But one interesting thing that jumped out right away is when you break down the revenue by type, the amount of revenue that's we categorize as growth-related revenue for the city of Harriman, that's the chart you see on the left, versus what we consider to be ongoing revenue. You can see as the growth really started picking up in 2014, the share of the city's budget that was reliant upon that growth-related revenue started growing very quickly. And so that in 2016, 32% of your budget was coming from that growth-related revenue. That's impact fees, some of those revenues that are only there because you're growing. When you look at that compared to your neighbors, they're on the right, you can see it's a little bit imbalanced. You look at some of those cities that are a little bit older, they're down 7-8% compared to 32%, and that has rightfully caused some concern or heartburn for some of the staff as well as the council to understand what are things going to look like in the future. So we took some of these findings and, in addition to this, a number of other insights, and then we did a round of stakeholder interviews, and so we're grateful for staff. They helped set this up. We met with several council members, the incoming mayor, a number of developers and business owners around the community to kind of check some of these assumptions and see what their thoughts were in terms of what they wanted a balanced economy to look like. What do they see as the issues and challenges, and go from there. A couple things that jumped out in that process, and the number one factor in terms of trying to determine the balanced economy is the fact that historically, Harriman has been a cul-de-sac community. That term came up a number of times. Or they either call it a cul-de-sac directly or said, you only come here if you want to come here, or if you get lost. We don't have those destinations that are pulling people here. We don't have I-15. We don't have the traffic corridor. So really, historically, we've just been that bedroom community. And so you look at some of the comparison cities, we determined, we need to look and maybe change that comparison set. So we're looking at what are the other cul-de-sac communities on the Wasatch Front? Because even though they may not be your most proximate neighbors, in terms of the issues they face and some of the ways they've overcome those issues, they're probably going to be a more accurate comparison than one of your more proximate neighbors. So I need to turn over to Josh for just a few minutes. He's going to go through the methodology that we used in identifying some of those other comparable cul-de-sac communities, and then we'll come back and kind of wrap up on the findings.
Good evening. Thank you once again for having us with you tonight. So like Kelby said, when we look at all these different communities, there's many different attributes to consider. For example, we wanted to find communities that were more relatively built out, that were bounded by the mountains, maybe on one side, maybe along I-15, a couple cul-de-sac communities so that we could get a broad range of what these communities have been able to accomplish, how much commercial activity they've been able to attract. And also, obviously, there are many different variables. These communities are different on different levels. But here's a map of the communities that we chose. So you can see right off that Sandy and Draper are more similar to Harriman in size. Harriman, or Holiday, Alpine, Cottonwood Heights, those are all smaller communities, but cul-de-sac communities and off of I-15. So are comparable on those levels to help understand Harriman's relativity to what they've been able to accomplish. So once again, they're different on multiple levels. You can see here that Sandy, very similar in total size. Their build-out population is very similar, around 114,000 median household income. Anyway, this is a demographic overview. You can see how they're similar and dissimilar on different levels. You could say that Sandy may be a best-case scenario. If we looked at the amount of commercial space that they've been able to build, they're along I-15. They have the same amount of space, similar build-out population, but because of that I-15 corridor, they do have that advantage. So there's some interesting insights moving forward, but one of the key takeaways here, traditionally, when we're quantifying the demand for retail, many times the number of housetops is overstated in its importance. Obviously, it's important. We can see that Sandy has triple the amount of housetops, but they have over 16 times the amount of commercial space. So while rooftops is an important factor, it's one element in the equation for determining that demand. So this shows super regional centers in the area. You could refer to Mountain View Village. I believe you're all aware of that in Riverton. That would be considered a super regional center because of its nature and the retail impact that will have. Super regional centers have over 1 million square feet in gross leasable space, and they really suck the oxygen out of the air in the areas that they're in. You can see they're approximately 7 miles spaced apart, and 5 of the 6 that you see here within a 25-mile radius of Harriman are along that I-15 corridor. Like I said, you're familiar with this project, but just a brief overview. 85 acres will be developed. Mountain View will open, I believe, in August this year. But projects like this do have that capability to be very attractive for both retail and office uses. They've estimated approximately 3 million square feet of office and retail at a total build-out of around 543 acres. And if we take Station Park and some of the other comparable projects, that does seem to be the case. This is a general layout of what that area would look like and the speculated breakdown of what the retail and office residential will look like for that particular development. And then now some of the committed tenants. So like we said, back to this super regional center, that has to be considered in this analysis, obviously. They do suck some of the oxygen out of the air. Harriman will more than triple its population, so that effect will somewhat balance over time, but will always be an item of concern for the community as it reaches out to new retail businesses. So I'll turn it back over to Kelby now.
Okay, and just maybe to point out one additional thing. We're going to go back a couple slides. So there's a breakdown here. This is based on looking at Station Park and looking at, because it's very similar in size and scope. It's the same developer. And based on what they've done at Station Park, and then these speculations, these are based on looking at what happened at Station Park for their phase 1, you could call it. Now they have what they call Station Park North, which includes a lot of major office going in. So those numbers, what we did is extrapolate looking at what these other super regional centers have done, and based on the amount of space that's been allocated to Mountain View Village, what we anticipate to be developed in terms of the number of acres of office space, retail, and the balance being in residential. Questions on that so far? Are we still tracking in terms of? So this chart comes from the Urban Land Institute in terms of talking about what is the market absorption and capability of different types of retail or office commercial developments. So you look at that super regional center there at the bottom of the first table, as Josh mentioned, usually have about 1 million square feet of space. Site acres is usually 100 or more. And with Mountain View Village, the way it's been planned, it certainly qualifies as that super regional center. Which you go back to the, this is being a little bit laggy. So in terms of major projects in Harriman, we need to keep that in mind. That's that healthy dose of reality. We're not going to get a second super regional center to happen here within this circle, most likely. It's going to be a while, and when it does come in, it's most likely going to be up here, where they're capturing a different segment of the market.
When you say up here, what do you mean we can't?
Can't see.
Oh, you can't see our. Oh, I thought on your monitors you had this presentation.
We can see that. You're pointing at something, and we don't know what you're pointing up. You say up here.
Oh, if you look at the top of the, you'll see the number 1, which is Mountain View Village. If you look at the yellow circle, that's the 7-mile radius, about approximately how far these things are spaced apart. So basically, we're not going to get a second Mountain View Village in Harriman. It's not going to happen. That's the reality. Most likely, it would come in where you see the convergence of the yellow, blue, and purple circles, because they're going to space these out where they have a population of 300,000 plus within their capturable market area. But all is not lost. That just means we're not going to get a super regional center in Harriman, because Mountain View Village is going to take that oxygen away. So one of the things that has been talked about are other types of regional big box stores, and what's the capability of those coming in and filling up some of the commercial land in Harriman. If you look at where those are located, we've outlined those within both a 4-mile radius, which we call the local market area, as well as an 8-mile radius. And if you look at it, there's a lot that are already covered within the 4-mile radius, which again makes it a challenge in terms of what are we going to do with our commercial space, because a lot of who'd want to bring in here are already within the 4-mile or certainly the 8-mile range. However, there are some areas that we identified as potential capture targets. For instance, hospitality there in the center. There are very few hospitality opportunities within your 4-mile market range. And that can be a very important piece of revenue for a city, which historically Harriman has not really tapped into. So that should be an area of key focus, particularly with the RSL project and some of those things that are going to be bringing people in, helping Harriman become a destination and having the hospitality that both provides a revenue stream as well as an amenity for your businesses that are here. There are some grocery stores that we identified. Both this is something the staff has been looking at, as well as our own analysis looking at who is not in that 4-mile or 8-mile radius.
Before we go any further,
yeah,
I just want to make it very clear to our residents, this is not saying that we're going to get these particular locations.
Correct.
Because I know how desperately our residents want a Winco or a Whole Foods or Trader Joe's. We would love to have them here, so if you're interested, come talk to us. But this is not saying you're getting one.
Better
Correct.
Contact those.
Yeah, you should contact them
companies
and
and
tell them
tell
how
them.
awesome we are and how much you want us.
There are a number of factors, and again, it comes back to the Mountain View Village. Because they are there, the natural place for these grocers to go is going to be in that area. And so we have to keep that in mind, because that does impact what we can bring, because of that's where the momentum is going to naturally go. So that great point, Mayor. That doesn't mean they're coming. That just means here are some potential targets that we could look at. And just to summarize kind of the local, what we call regional retail, not the super regional retail. And those are the big box stores, and you kind of see how it breaks down. But want to highlight here just the co-opetition opportunities with Mountain View Village. Co-opetition is what we call when auto dealerships locate next to each other. They're competitors, but they want to be next to their competitor because they both do better. Harriman should keep in mind, yes, there will be retailers that want to go to that Mountain View Village development, but there will be other retailers that want to be close, but due to exclusivity rights, they can't be in Mountain View Village. Those should be the types of retailers that are targeted that can have that co-opetition opportunity by being close, but being far enough away they may be outside the exclusivity radius. Questions so far? Nothing too surprising yet. So this is where it gets really fun, because now we start looking at, within those comparison cities, looking at Sandy and Draper is kind of our litmus test, like best case scenario. Then looking at those other cul-de-sac communities, looking at total city acreage and then the current number of acres they have allocated to commercial space, both in retail and office, and then the number of, basically how that extrapolates out, the gross retail sales they have from that area, then the retail square, the retail square footage of the buildings within that, and that's assuming a 30% coverage ratio. That's kind of an industry standard. If you have 1 acre dedicated to commercial, 30% of that's going to be your building, and the rest of it's going to be your access, parking, etc. So if you break all that down and you exclude Sandy and Draper, because they're just our benchmarks, if you look at the other cul-de-sac communities, they average $341 in sales per square foot of retail space. So we took that number and then started looking at, so keep that number in mind. The next piece is looking at the retail market capture. So again, looking at those cul-de-sac communities, looking at the number of households they have, what is their median household income, and you times those together, and that's what gives you your rough purchasing power estimate. So that's basically the amount of money that's available within your community to buy stuff. And then you look back at the gross retail sales that those cul-de-sac communities, as well as Sandy and Draper, are receiving. And that percentage on the right column, that's the percentage of income that's spent on local retail. There's other factors at play here. Transportation access is a big deal because Sandy and Draper are capturing a lot of leakage from all these other cul-de-sac communities. So that's why they're so high. It's not that 97% of the local, but it shows you they're capturing a lot of the regional activity because it's happening in Sandy and Draper because they're on I-15. So if you look at the non-I-15 communities, excluding Alpine, because Alpine is very excluded, so we threw them out as an outlier, roughly 34% of their local purchasing power is spent on their retail. So if you now the next step of that is, if we know what we can expect from a cul-de-sac community in terms of retail spend, we know what our purchasing power is, and so now we extrapolated based on that to look at what is the land absorption estimate for Harriman at build-out. Assuming that the median household income doesn't dramatically shift, and the number of individuals per household stays consistent, that's about 27,000 households at your total population, with a total purchasing power of $2.1 billion. And if you use that 34% based on these other cul-de-sac communities, that comes up with an amount of retail spend of $740 million. And that average retail sales per square foot at 341, that gets you down to the required retail square footage within Harriman City. Kind of see how we're going through this? Well, then you use that 30% estimate on the number of square feet versus the number of acres, and the estimate based on performance in the valley would suggest that approximately 166 acres within Harriman could be absorbed for retail. And then also you look at those other communities in terms of what's the multiplier or the factor between the amount of retail space and the amount of commercial space. We use that factor to get to the 277. So you add these up, and based on what market reality looks like at build-out, if factors don't dramatically shift, that would suggest that the appropriate balanced amount that could be expected for commercial land absorption in Harriman would be approximately 443 acres. Questions on that methodology? Now, if you look at what the current city plan has allocated, we're at 597 acres. So how do we justify the difference? And there's a couple things we want to point out. This is traditional retail. This is traditional retail outside of a super regional center, outside of a major unique project. That's what you could expect to be absorbed. However, your staff, the city leadership is already going after several major unique projects, such as the Auto Mall, the Real Salt Lake project. So we consider those to be outliers that would be separate from your traditional commercial and retail space of 443. So if we add those in, that's an additional 133 acres that really doesn't count against your 443, basically, which gets to a projected commercial acreage demand of about 576 acres, which is basically right where you have allocated. Pretty spot on in terms of what we'd expect to happen.
So what you're saying is that we've planned our community well, and now it's time for us to go after the commercial, commercial and retail development to help make that balance even at build out.
Correct, because just because you've said we want 597 acres doesn't mean that it's going to happen. It takes a lot of proactive effort to really bring in those projects and think outside the box, because even with this in mind, you are right next to this super regional center. So it's going to be a challenge to even hit these numbers, because the water is going to flow the path of least resistance, which is going to be, that Mountain View Village area.
Does that? Never mind, I'll ask it later. Thank
Okay. And I'm going to come back to this in just a second, but one of the things that the staff has asked us to look at specifically is the industrial land. And industrial land we look at separately from the commercial space. And in particular, the Kennecott site that has been in discussions in terms of doing something major there. We think that's a great opportunity, and it really falls into a separate category than what we've been talking about, because it's kind of it's its own animal. But due to the location being even more of a cul-de-sac right now, your options are limited. You're not going to get retail there probably, at least for a while. So really that means residential or industrial. And residential density is one thing that in the past, you've been told housetops means retail, housetops means retail. And that's true, but like that map we showed,
But
location,
it's Riverton's retail at this point.
Yeah, at this point, that's what it is. It's the location that really drives that in addition to just housetops. So industrial is a great opportunity for that area because you can create a destination. You have a lot of contiguous land where it can become the draw that's pulling people in. And it's a great fit for the Megasite program within EDC Utah. So just really briefly, Megasites, it's a relatively new designation for industrial sites. They're 350 plus acres, and they have to have all the infrastructure access ready and primed to go.
Can you help me help me and the rest of the residents understand what you mean by industrial sites?
Yeah, so these are like industrial projects. There's several examples. The one that we're most familiar with is up in Ogden. They call it BDO, Business Depot Ogden. It was an old Army depot that got shut down and lost about 1,000 jobs. And the city really repositioned all those buildings in that area to become an industrial park. So now you have companies like White Clouds. They're a 3D printing company, one of the biggest in the world that's there. And you've got all these industrial light manufacturing, some other types of manufacturing. But because they're close by, it creates these synergies in this industrial park. They can share an infrastructure cost. They have the rail access. It's close to retail in terms of lunchtime activity. So it creates some real synergies,
But we're not talking like auto manufacturers.
No, you're not talking about a power plant or big smokestacks. It's a business industrial park, so it's light industrial manufacturing in terms of, and really that you can decide what it looks like because you can decide who comes in, and you can set design standards to make sure that it's compatible with what you want to see architecturally. But the idea is you bring that in, you concentrate it so it's able to get in businesses that can share the infrastructure. And it's not just industrial either, because for instance at BDO, they have companies like Hershey's. They have distribution centers, RocketLawyer.com. There's some tech companies that are in that park as well. So we call it an industrial park or mega site, but for instance, the Facebook project, that would have been a project that would have been something that could have happened at a mega site. So it's not just the big smokestacks, that type of industry. But it has to be big. So right now, Utah only has one designated mega site. It's in Alberta, 3,500 acres. They have 1,100 certified acres. So it's similar in size and scope, at least the certified portion, to what the Kennecott site could be. And one of the things they really tout in that Alberta project is we have 220,000 people within 30 miles. We've got a great labor shed. Well, Harriman, you blow the socks off of them. Because if you look at your market area in the labor shed of the Kennecott site, you can see there, that's the 30-minute, 45-minute, and 60-minute drive time. And you've got almost 1 million people within 30 minutes. And of that 1 million, 424,000 are working age. So this is a much better site. So it's a great candidate. And if that were to be developed, that can be one of the drivers that helps you absorb some of your other commercial space. it becomes that driving, that destination that really helps drive everything else.
And with the destination of a mega site where you're talking about, you're also looking at the one traffic corridor that takes the clustering of day jobs and puts them right where we have tentatively planned, not a super mega regional site, but certainly a regional site with some anchors. I mean, it's going to be much more convenient for that daytime population to travel a short distance to a much smaller regional site with some larger anchors and, you know, restaurants and things like that than to, you know, take the extra time to go to the super regional site. So it could very well support the type of regional center that we're already considering on 118.
Correct,
That's what
yeah.
I'm referring to.
That's a great way to look at it. It helps support it. And in fact, efforts toward this project would be very reassuring to any potential tenants within that other project. There's no silver bullets in economic development. You have to pursue all these projects simultaneously because no one has that 8 ball. No one knows exactly what's going to happen. So you need to pursue all these wonderful potential wins because you're not going to get them all. But by getting something to occur at the Kennecott site, that's going to help drive.
And that's what I'm really trying to drill down and ask is, you've looked at what our plans are on 118th.
We have.
So with this mega site concept, which I agree, I think it's a fantastic, target for us. If we were to pursue that, creating a really solid daytime population, we already have significant rooftops in that area between us and South Jordan. Then with that combination, do you see that as making the site that we've already discussed with, you know, the square footage we've discussed viable with the daytime population we're talking about creating and the existing rooftops supporting the square footage that we're already talking about for our regional center on 118th?
And I don't know if I can definitively say absolutely. It's going to certainly help drive that. We think at build out.
But it's a reasonable expectation that could develop that way.
And it will help because that has slowed down a little bit due to, you know, Walmart in their just global policy right now where they're kind of reevaluating the way they build buildings. And so having that daytime population that's captive in your area certainly is going to help reassure other potential tenants and help drive just overall commercial land consumption.
I hope they can hear this out in the lobby. I can't tell if the volume's on up there, but I'm looking at all those developers that are outside. Hope they hear this.
But I think
but it's important to note, though, just because it's there doesn't mean it's going to happen. It's going to take a lot of work and effort to get there. Yeah, go ahead.
But hand in glove, I mean, what I'm hearing from you is that with the super regional center, it essentially eliminates the option for a regional center in Harriman, but for the fact, and this is what I'm trying to drill down to, if we are to create a daytime population of some significance with the supporting retail, then there ought to be some element of viability for a scaled down regional center with some larger anchors, something certainly above a neighborhood shopping center.
Certainly, and we think that could happen just based on your local purchasing power, as highlighted here. If you get something like that, though, that's going to accelerate the consumption of that land.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah, because what we don't want to, and just to wrap things up, just our conclusions. Based on the regional averages of the cul-de-sac communities, as we talked, the commercial land consumption estimate is about 443 acres. And the current land allocations, and we've heard there's some discussion of even expanding that, of adding additional several hundred acres of commercial land to your general plan. And just keep that in mind that yes, we might want that, but we got to keep that healthy dose of reality in mind. Otherwise, what's going to happen is we will end up with zoning or commercial blight. And that is land that's been designated as commercial, but the market demand just isn't there yet. And it remains vacant. And depending on priorities, maybe vacant land isn't a problem. But if vacant land is something you don't want to see happen, you need to be careful to not overzone certain land uses if the market doesn't suggest they'll be consumed. And then the last thing is just non-traditional uses should be sought. The RSL project, the Automall project, you know, other communities are fighting for that Automall project as well. So you're going to have to fight tooth and nail to get something like that to happen. And then what this is leading to is now the next phase of our project is looking at additional non-traditional uses, some creative out-of-the-box type projects that the council could consider exploring that could help you absorb your current commercial allocation.
Will you speak to getting to this non-traditional uses or finding your niche? I specifically want you to go back to Ogden's experience, because I think Ogden is a really great example of a city that transformed itself by doing exactly that. They looked for a niche, as I understand it, particularly in recreational and outdoor. So perhaps you could just speak to that a little bit in terms of the tactic that Ogden used that I really do think was a 360 for the city and enabled them to find an untapped potential that the state needed, and then you filled that.
Yeah, and love to talk offline because that's a long story, and I want to keep everyone here.
I would love to hear that story. So maybe just in generalities.
But in brief, what had happened is that the city tried to recruit in companies. They went to trade shows. They said, Ogden's this cool place to live. Come bring your company to Ogden. And it fell flat because no one where's Ogden? Ogden's this really rundown city. Why would we want to go there? And so it really took repositioning the city and creating a vision for the future. And they determined, because on natural assets, we could become the ski capital of the country because of our proximity to major ski resorts, our access for manufacturing. And so they started putting in investments that the city put their money where their mouth was. So the city started building investments in the downtown area. They started this high adventure center that's called the Solomon Center now. That was under construction, and they went and approached companies saying, we're building this high adventure center. We want you to be part of this vision. And because there was momentum building, that's how they were able to recruit in a dozen ski brands, including some of the who's who of the ski industry, to relocate headquarters or manufacturing or both to Ogden. So it was creating that vision that made sense based on the assets that were available, and then really with laser-like focus going after that industry.
That statement right there, I think, is the key for a cul-de-sac community like ours, is to find what that discriminating factor is. In many respects, it's the amount of land that we have, but looking to how we can position ourselves in such a way that we create an element that sets us apart. I mean, I think that's the only thing that makes sense for a community like ours.
So, any other questions? We'll keep you updated as we do phase 2.
I just wanted to say I appreciate this. This is extremely helpful information. We're obviously in our legislative cycle right now with the state, and so as we're looking for funding for roads or for infrastructure projects, knowing where to put our focus so that we can be effective and really focusing in on what we need for our economic development is key in a lot of ways. So we appreciate it, and this was extremely informative and helpful. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks for your time.
All right, so that's all the reports, presentations, and appointments. Now we can actually move on to our agenda. So we're going to go on to 5, which is the consent agenda. So I will go ahead and take a motion on that at this point.
Mayor, if we could, are they, okay, you're giving me, what one? Okay. 5.3 on our consent agenda talks about the community facilitators. Oh. We had the pleasure of meeting our other community facilitators in the past. I believe we have one from Community 2. One long-suffering community facilitator is where? Oh, you, okay.
Come on
At
down.
least stand up. You have stayed this length of time. Would you mind just introducing yourself really quick, Mayor, with your...
Please, no.
You've sat for so long, you ought to be able to at least say your name.
If nothing more to alleviate the possibility of a DVT from sitting there so long.
Thank you so much for staying.
You bet. My name's Lauren Palmer. Been a resident of Harriman coming to about 5 years now. Live over in Lafayette Estates. Wanted to get involved a little while ago, but was involved with the referendum process actually, and felt like it was a conflict of interest at that point. But now that that's kind of, we've moved down the road, I'm one of those that doesn't like to create a brouhaha without getting involved after. So I wanted to be involved with the city, and that's why as soon as the opportunity arose, that's why I'm here, and look forward to keeping on serving in the community. So
Excited to have you. Thank you for serving.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, with that, I will now accept a motion regarding a consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Jared?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
Nicole?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. That passes. Yay. All right. That was our agenda. So we'll go ahead and move on to calendar items. On February 1st, the Planning Commission will be meeting at 6 p.m. for, that would be their work meeting, correct? Or is that a joint meeting?
That's the regular.
That's the regular work meeting. On February 1st and 2nd, our council will be meeting together to have our launch of our priorities and our vision for this new council. So it will be an opportunity for us to get to know each other a little bit better, as well as to really start to laser focus down on what our vision really is for the city, as we bring the vision that our residents have shared with us. So I look forward to that. It'll be a couple of days, and it will not be a retreat. It's not a fun thing. It's something that we're excited to help the city move forward. We also have on February 9th the Little Sweethearts Dance at City Hall at 6 p.m. So that should be an awesome time. We will not be moving into closed meeting today. We don't, is that correct? We're still, yeah, we will not be moving into closed meeting today.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I'd also just like for our calendar of events, just
Sure.
to mention, we were made aware tonight on February the 7th, we'll be holding an open house.
Yes, thank you.
From 6:30 to 8:30 with regards to potential amendment to the current general plan. So
Thank you, I
want
appreciate
to make
that.
sure that we start to get that out there so that the public is well aware of
For
that.
those commercial sites we were talking about.
For
Yes.
those commercial sites only. Only the commercial sites.
Yes.
With that, I will entertain a motion to move back to work meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I knew I was missing something. Done. How was that, Nicole?
Much better.
It was. I was committed last time. It was like